Scarcity signals desire. You've probably noticed how the moment something feels like it's slipping away, you grip harder. A text conversation that suddenly goes quiet. A person who was always available then isn't. A limited time offer you almost missed. Your nervous system flips a switch before your mind even catches up. And now that thing feels urgent, electric, worth fighting for. That reaction isn't random. It's buried so deep in your brain that you barely notice it's happening. Scarcity creates a chemical pull that abundance can never touch. When something is rare, your brain reads it as valuable. When something is about to vanish, your brain reads it as a threat. Combine those two and you get desire that feels like it's coming from your gut, from something true and urgent, when really it's just a very old alarm bell ringing. The real trick is that people feel this pull toward other humans, someone who has other options, who isn't sitting around waiting, who has a full life and limited bandwidth for you. That person registers as high value. Not because they actually are, but because scarcity itself is the signal your brain learned to trust over millennia. Your attention sharpens. You want to be chosen. You start thinking about what makes you worth their time. The person who understands this, who doesn't perform constant availability, who has real boundaries and genuine interests outside of you, becomes the one everyone reaches for. It's not manipulation, it's just neurology. The real edge comes down to authenticity, scarcity that springs from an actual full life versus scarcity you're faking to seem interesting. One draws people in slowly and keeps them there. The other leaves them chasing a ghost. The dopamine of uncertainty. You know that feeling when someone texts back 4 hours later instead of 4 minutes, and somehow that delay makes them more interesting? That's not random. Your brain just got a hit of dopamine, and it wasn't because the message was brilliant. It was because you didn't know when it was coming. Uncertainty is a drug, and it's more potent than certainty ever will be. Dopamine doesn't spike when you get what you expect. It spikes when the reward is unpredictable. Slot machines work on this exact principle. Text them back reliably and you become background noise. Text them back sometimes fast, sometimes slow, and suddenly you're the person they wonder about. This is why people obsess over those who seem indifferent. The mixed signals keep the dopamine pump running, hot and cold, present and distant, interested and unavailable. Each swing of the pendulum is a tiny bet, and your brain loves placing bets it doesn't know the outcome of. The cruelty here is real. The person who is consistently kind and steady triggers a boring, stable chemical response. The person who is brilliant one day and silent the next, that person owns your attention. Predictability breeds comfort, but also invisibility. Unpredictability breeds hunger. This doesn't mean you should be cruel or gameplay someone, but it means if you want to matter to someone, you have to understand that certainty is the opposite of magnetism. The moment someone knows exactly what they'll get from you, the dopamine machine stops. Leave them guessing just enough to keep wondering, and you become the person they can't stop thinking about. Intermittent reinforcement bonding. You text someone and they ghost you for 3 days. Then suddenly they send you a long, warm message at 2 a.m. The relief you feel is almost euphoric, more intense than if they just replied normally. Your brain just got hit with an unpredictable reward, and that's far more addictive than a consistent one. This is intermittent reinforcement, and it's the same mechanism that keeps people pulling slot machine levers. The uncertainty itself becomes the drug. When someone is unreliably available, unreliably affectionate, unreliably attentive, you don't start pulling away. You lean harder. Your nervous system is trained to expect the reward might come, and that might keeps you hooked in a way steady, predictable kindness never will. The cruelest part, inconsistency can make you bond more deeply than genuine care because your brain interprets the scarcity as value. If they were always there, why treasure them? But if they disappear and reappear, you start reorganizing your entire emotional world around the possibility of their return. You excuse their coldness, you rationalize the silence, you study their patterns obsessively, all hunting for the next hit. You might even convince yourself that the struggle is proof of how much you love them, that real intimacy requires friction. Your reward system cannot tell the difference between a slot machine and a person. This isn't a flaw in your psychology, it's a feature. Evolutionary machinery doesn't care about your happiness. It just cares that uncertain rewards keep you hunting. Awareness doesn't break the spell, but it does let you name what's happening. You're not in love, you're in a slot machine. That distinction is where freedom starts. Mystery as a cognitive itch. You know that feeling when someone doesn't quite reveal themselves, when they answer your question but leave a thread hanging, when they smile and change the subject, when you can't quite figure out what they're actually thinking. It doesn't repel you, it pulls. Your brain hates incomplete information more than it hates bad information, and incomplete is exactly what mystery is. It's a cognitive itch that your mind can't stop scratching. The person who seems totally figured out, who has no edges, who tells you everything, your attention slides right past them. But the one who keeps you guessing, you're magnetized. Your brain involuntarily leans in because it treats unresolved questions like unsolved puzzles, and puzzles demand solution. This is why mystery has always been a core component of attraction, especially dark attraction. When you don't know someone's full move, when there's ambiguity in their expression or intention, you fill the gap with your own narrative. You project your hopes, your fears, your desires onto that space. And here's the hook. That projection is your mental effort. You've already done half the work of falling for them before they've said a second word. The mysterious person isn't necessarily more interesting. They're just leaving room for your mind to do the interesting part. But here's the quiet danger. Mystery can be weaponized. Withholding information, offering just enough vulnerability to seem real, but never enough to be known. It's a deliberate architecture of incompleteness. Some people call it charm. Others call it manipulation. The difference lies in whether the mystery eventually resolves into authenticity or whether it's just a permanent smokescreen built to keep you hunting. Zeigarnik effect in romance. You send a message and stop mid-thought, literally mid-sentence, no period, just blank air. Now the other person sits there waiting for the rest, and that unfinished thing burns louder in their mind than anything you could have completed. This is the Zeigarnik effect, your brain's obsession with open loops, incomplete stories, unanswered questions, trailing off conversations. They stick to memory harder than neat, wrapped up ones because your mind keeps trying to close them. It's a pull, an itch. You remember the argument that ended without resolution better than the fight you solved. A cliffhanger keeps you awake, but the ending doesn't. In romance, this works like currency. The person who's hard to read, who says something then goes quiet, who leaves you wondering, they're not memorable because they're cool. They're memorable because your brain is literally working overtime on them, trying to complete the picture, following the thread, and the more effort your mind spends on someone, the more real they feel, the more you lean in, the more invested you become. But here's the sharp part. You're not closer to them. You're closer to a question mark wearing their face. The loop is open inside you, not inside them. They might move on tomorrow. They might forget the message entirely. You might stay stuck for weeks, building the story that holds the gap together, filling silence with your own need. If you want to stay awake in someone's mind, yes, leave space, but know what you're doing, finishing the unfinished inside them, and they might complete it without you. Ambiguity sustains attention. Someone texts you okay and your stomach drops. 3 letters, no emoji, no follow-up. Your mind immediately spins. Are they mad, distant, okay with what you said, or okay with you? You spend the next hour replaying the conversation, searching for clues that were never there because the gap between what was said and what it might mean is eating at you. That gap is everything. Ambiguity doesn't repel attention, it hijacks it. Think about why you keep scrolling through someone's Instagram stories, reading into the song they posted at 2 a.m., the photo angle, the caption's tone. If they posted a selfie with a clear message, I'm happy, you'd glance and move on. But a blurry night photo with no caption, you're constructing narratives. Your brain needs to solve the puzzle, and as long as it's unsolved, you stay locked in. Certainty bores, mystery holds. This is why hot and cold behavior gets under your skin more than consistent coldness does. Consistent cruelty you can reject and walk away from. But someone who is warm, then distant, then warm again, you keep coming back because you're convinced the real version is hiding somewhere, and you just need to find the right move, the right words, the right version of yourself to unlock it. The ambiguity makes you feel like you're close to understanding, always one conversation away. That proximity, that almost, is the hook. And the person who learns to live in that gray space, neither fully invested nor fully withdrawn, becomes the one people obsess over. They stay unknowable, and unknowable things demand attention. Reward prediction error spikes. Imagine texting someone you like and getting a response within seconds. Your dopamine goes quiet. Then you text again and wait 6 hours before they reply. That delay, that gap between what you expected and what actually happened, that's a spike in your reward prediction error, and it floods your nervous system with way more neurochemical juice than the quick reply ever could. Your brain doesn't reward you for getting what you want. It rewards you for the surprise of wanting something and then not getting it, at least not right away. This is why intermittent reinforcement, unpredictable rewards, is so much more addictive than consistent ones. A slot machine beats a vending machine every time. The person who always texts back fast becomes background noise. The one who sometimes ghosts you for days, then suddenly shows up with something beautiful or tender, rewires your entire dopamine system around them. Attraction doesn't live in consistency, it lives in the gap. You become hooked not on the reward itself, but on the uncertainty of when it's coming. This is exactly how casinos work, how social media works, and how people who seem a little unavailable become magnetic. The trick is not to manufacture chaos for its own sake. That reads as insecurity and keeps you small. Instead, it's about being genuinely selective with your attention and responses, honoring your own rhythm and priorities so that when you do show up for someone, it lands as a real surprise, something earned rather than assumed. Your scarcity becomes their craving, not because you're playing games, but because you actually have other things worth your time. Withheld approval hunger. Someone you care about gives you a compliment, and it lands differently when it's rare. You notice you're waiting for it, watching for signs of pride in their eyes. When it finally comes, you feel it more than you'd feel daily praise from someone else. That's the architecture of scarcity at work, and it's not an accident when it happens in relationships. The rarest approval becomes the most addictive. you start organizing your behavior around earning it. You're not becoming better for yourself, you're becoming better for the specific moment when they might finally acknowledge you. Your nervous system learns that their approval is unpredictable, and unpredictability is what gets us hooked. Slot machines work the same way. Withheld approval creates hunger because the brain doesn't know when the reward is coming. So it keeps spinning, keeps trying, keeps hoping, and the person who withholds it, whether consciously or not, becomes disproportionately powerful in your emotional economy. You end up spending more mental energy on them than on people who are generous with recognition. They've accidentally engineered themselves into your thoughts. Now, here's what makes this dynamic dark. It doesn't require them to be particularly impressive or kind. A dismissive parent, an aloof partner, a cool friend who's stingy with warmth, they all create the same pull. You're not attracted to the person. You're addicted to the relief of finally getting through. The moment you see this pattern in yourself, the spell weakens. You're no longer hunting for approval. You're observing the hunt. That awareness is what breaks the lock. The person who withholds becomes less magnetic the second you notice you're chasing. The non-reciprocal validation gap. Think about the last time you poured energy into someone who gave almost nothing back. You remember every word they said. They forgot you texted. You showed up. They showed up sometimes. And yet you kept reaching, kept trying to make them see you. This is the non-reciprocal validation gap, and it digs deeper into the attraction machinery than almost anything else. When someone gives you sparse, intermittent attention, your brain doesn't file that away as bad partner material. Instead, it treats those crumbs like treasure. You become convinced that if you just say the right thing, be the right person, maybe next time they'll really see you. The gap itself becomes magnetic. You are not attracted to them because they are consistently good to you. You are attracted to the possibility that they could be, and that possibility lives only in the gap between what they give and what they could give. Every small validation from them rewires your reward system far more than consistent care ever could. That inconsistency makes their attention scarce, and scarcity makes us hunt. The real trap runs even deeper. The people who need the least validation from you are the ones you will chase hardest, because their indifference becomes proof they are rare, that winning them means something. If you are the only one doing the reaching, the only one remembering, the only one building the bridge, you are not in attraction. You are in a one-person game where the other person gets to win just by existing, and you are paying the price of admission every single day. The cruelest part is that this gap never closes. It only teaches you to want harder. Selective attention as currency. Watch what happens when you walk into a room full of people and lock eyes with someone for an extra half second longer than normal. Their pupils dilate slightly. Their posture shifts toward you. Something in their nervous system knows you saw them when you could have looked away. That choice to keep your attention on them instead of scanning the room just sent a signal worth more than a compliment. In a world where everyone's attention is fractured across feeds and notifications and 100 competing demands, genuine focus has become a scarcity. The person who receives it feels rare. They feel chosen. This is why people chase certain individuals obsessively while ignoring others who are objectively more attractive. It's not the beauty, it's the bandwidth. Someone looked at you like you were the only thing that mattered, and your brain registered it as proof that you matter. This is why the quiet person in the corner who remembers your story from 3 weeks ago can outmaneuver the charming one who works the whole room. Attention is not just flattery, it's evidence. It says you are worth the mental real estate. When you withdraw attention suddenly, the same mechanism works in reverse. People scramble to get back what they felt they had. They question what changed. They doubt themselves. This is why intermittent focus, giving it, then pulling back, then returning, creates a feedback loop of craving. You are not manipulating anyone. You are simply showing them what their own mind generates when it believes something matters and might slip away. Use this carefully. Delayed response calibration. You send a text, 3 minutes pass, you check, nothing. Suddenly, every word you wrote feels wrong. Needy, stupid, too eager. So you send another one, then another. And the person who receives that cascade of messages doesn't see someone confident. They see someone nervous, someone unmoored, someone whose emotional regulation just broke in real time. Here's what most people don't understand about attraction. It's not built on speed. It's built on rhythm. When you reply instantly to everything, you signal that you have nothing else going on, that this person is the entire gravitational center of your world. Delayed response calibration is the practice of matching or slightly exceeding the response lag of the person you're trying to attract. Not games, not punishment, calibration. If someone takes 4 hours to reply, you take 5 or 6. If they're slow to text but fast to call, you reverse it. What this does is communicate a kind of gentle scarcity. Your attention is valuable, it's distributed, it's earned. You're not desperate for stimulation or validation. You have internal weather, private spaces they haven't been invited into yet. The real power move isn't the delay itself, it's that you become someone whose replies feel like small gifts instead of obligations. People treasure what requires waiting. They despise what's always available. The moment you learn to hold your own emotional needs steady enough to let a conversation breathe naturally, to sit with discomfort without reaching for your phone, you stop looking like you need them and start looking like someone worth the actual investment of keeping around. That invisible shift is unmistakable, and it changes everything. Push-pull dynamics. There's a reason people crave someone who is not fully available to them. You text, they take 4 hours to reply, your nervous system registers absence, your brain scrambles to explain it, spinning stories about why, maybe they're busy, maybe they're losing interest. That uncertainty becomes a hook, and the hook becomes obsession. Scarcity and inconsistency are the two most powerful forces in human desire because we don't want what we already have. We want what we have to keep earning. The person who responds immediately feels safe, predictable, almost invisible. The person who pulls away feels like a puzzle, a challenge, a prize that might slip away if you don't try harder. Push-pull lives in conversation too. Share something real, then change the subject before they get too close. Be warm one moment, distant the next. Show them attention, then redirect it elsewhere. Give them a win, then make them doubt it. This inconsistency keeps them guessing, keeps them working to decode you, keeps them invested in closing a gap they didn't know existed. The dark part is its addictive power for both sides. The puller feels powerful, in control. The pursuer feels alive, electric, like they're playing a game they might actually lose. Neither feels safe, which is precisely why neither can look away. And that's the trap, mistaking this hot wire of uncertainty for genuine connection. It's not love, it's a feedback loop, a cycle of small punishments and small rewards that hijacks the brain. Understanding how it operates means you can use it consciously or recognize when someone is using it on you. Either way, you stop confusing intensity with intimacy. Approach avoidance conflict. Your thumb hovers over send for 10 seconds. You want to reach out. You're terrified of being rejected or looking desperate. Both urges are real, and they're pulling you in opposite directions at the same time, which is exactly why you feel paralyzed instead of moving. That freeze is approach avoidance conflict, and it shows up everywhere in attraction, not just in first messages. You crave someone's attention and simultaneously dread their judgment. You want to be vulnerable, but you're certain vulnerability will be used against you. You move closer and then pull back. You text, then delete. You plan to call, then convince yourself it's a bad time. The conflict isn't between two people. It's between two opposing drives in you, both screaming for control. The people who feel this most intensely are often the ones who've been hurt the most, who have the highest stakes riding on the outcome. Their nervous system learned to want things and protect against loss simultaneously, so they oscillate. They seem distant one day and hungry the next. They give mixed signals not out of games, but out of genuine internal war. If you recognize this in someone else, understand that their hesitation isn't about you. It's about the machinery running underneath their skin. If you recognize it in yourself, the move is smaller than you think. Acknowledge both urges at once instead of trying to kill one with willpower. You want this and you're scared. Both true. Neither cancels the other out. Send the message anyway. Reactance and forbidden fruit. Tell someone they cannot have something and watch what happens inside them. Not in theory, in the moment. A partner says, "Don't text my friend," and suddenly that friend becomes interesting in a way they weren't before. A person warns you a musician is overrated, and now you need to know why everyone else thinks they're genius. This is reactance, the psychological pushback that erupts when your freedom feels threatened. It is not logical. It does not care about your actual preferences. It only cares that someone drew a boundary. Reactance is one of the ugliest and most useful forces in human attraction. When you make yourself unavailable or create scarcity, whether real or implied, you trigger it. The other person does not experience this as restriction. They experience it as desire. They want the thing precisely because it is difficult. The wanting becomes so loud it drowns out the part of them that asks, "Do I actually like this person?" You have weaponized their own freedom against them. The trap is that reactance works. It works in dating, in negotiation, in salesmanship. Tell them they cannot have you, and they will convince themselves they need you. Withdraw attention, and they will circle back. But here is what people miss. Reactance creates brittle attachment. The moment the scarcity lifts, the moment they realize they can have you, the spell often breaks. They were never chasing you. They were chasing the feeling of being blocked from something. Once they have it, the real person underneath the fantasy appears, and that person, to them, is suddenly less interesting. Build with reactance, and you build on sand. Pre-selection social proof. Watch what happens at a crowded bar when someone walks in alone versus someone already surrounded by friends laughing at their jokes. The second person doesn't look more attractive because of their face. They look more attractive because other people already voted yes. That's pre-selection, and it's how your brain cuts corners when deciding who's worth wanting. If 5 people are already interested, the reasoning goes, there must be something real there. You don't have to do the hard work of figuring it out yourself. This works because attraction isn't purely individual, it's deeply social. When you see someone being chosen by others, your perception of them shifts almost instantly. A person you might have walked past becomes compelling just because they're in conversation with someone else or clearly desired by someone nearby. Your brain treats other people's interest as data. It's not cynical, it's efficient. You're outsourcing your judgment to the crowd. The dark part is how easily this gets weaponized. Someone can manufacture pre-selection by surrounding themselves with attractive people, by strategically being seen with admirers, or by creating the simple appearance of being wanted. They're not actually more valuable. They just stage the scene where value becomes obvious. And here's what most people miss. The effect works whether the pre-selection is real or performed. Your nervous system can't tell the difference between genuine admiration and a carefully curated crowd. The antidote isn't to ignore what others want. It's to pause when you feel that sudden shift in attraction and ask what specifically pulled you. Was it them, or was it the reflection you saw in someone else's eyes? Halo effect construction. Walk into a room in expensive clothes and watch what happens. People assume you're competent, kind, maybe even intelligent, even though fabric tells you nothing about how a mind works. Your brain doesn't care about that gap. It fills it. One bright spot casts a glow backward and forward across everything else, and suddenly the whole person feels better than they actually are. You can build this intentionally. The trick is understanding that halos don't come from being exceptional at everything. They come from being visibly exceptional at one thing people notice first: confidence, a specific skill, an unusual aesthetic, a real laugh. Whatever it is, it has to be concrete and immediate, not theoretical. Your brain doesn't work on data, it works on feeling and first impressions. So if someone meets you and the first thing they experience is your ease in discomfort, or your knowledge about something specific, or the way you listen without performing, that becomes the lens through which they interpret everything else. They'll excuse your awkwardness because you're comfortable. They'll forgive your mistakes because you're competent. They'll overlook your mess because you're authentic. The dark part is that once that halo is set, it becomes sticky and self-reinforcing. People work backward to justify it, rewriting evidence to fit the glow, seeing what supports the story and ignoring what doesn't. The real move is simple. Choose what you want to be exceptional at in front of them before anything else happens. Not fake, real, but intentional. That first brightness changes everything that comes after. Costly signaling of value. Watch how a person drops a wad of cash on dinner they don't need to order, or stays late at work on something that doesn't matter much, or turns down an easy opportunity because it feels beneath them. These aren't accidents, they're broadcasts. The cost is the point. It's the proof. When something genuinely hurts to give up, you're telling the world you have enough left over, that you're not desperate, that the real prize was never that thing in the first place. This is why the person who's hard to reach suddenly becomes magnetic, why the one who says no more often gets pursued harder, why someone who can afford to walk away from you holds all the air in the room. The scarcity isn't real in a physical sense, it's a signal. And our brains are wired to read those signals like temperature gauges. The tricky part is that authentic, costly signaling works because it costs something true, time you don't have, money that stings a little, comfort you genuinely give up. Fake displays collapse instantly because the cost isn't there. People smell that. So the people who accidentally become most attractive aren't performing value. They're living lives where real things actually matter more than validation. They're busy, they're selective, they've got something to lose. The darker angle? Once you understand this, you can engineer it. But the moment you're trying too hard to signal value, you've already leaked that you don't have it. The real move is building a life expensive enough to protect that you naturally become unavailable. Then attraction doesn't feel like luck. It feels inevitable. Handicap principle display. Watch someone walk into a room wearing an expensive watch they can barely afford, or notice how a genuinely confident person will openly admit a weakness and somehow becomes more magnetic, not less. That's the handicap principle at work, and it's far stranger than it sounds. In nature, a peacock's tail is a massive liability. It slows him down, makes him visible to predators, wastes energy to grow and maintain. Yet peahens choose him anyway. Why? Because only a male healthy enough, strong enough, and genetically sound enough to survive, despite that burden, can afford to carry it. The tail is proof. It's a costly signal that says I am so robust I can handicap myself and still thrive. Humans do the exact same thing, just differently. A person who admits they struggle with anxiety, or who visibly works a demanding job, or who takes up space without apologizing, they're signaling that they're stable enough to be vulnerable. They're not performing perfection because they don't need to. The weak play it safe. They hide. They follow the script. But someone genuinely secure, they can afford to be real. That willingness to let others see the cost you pay just by existing broadcasts something deep. You don't need validation to stay standing. The trap is obvious, though. Don't manufacture weakness or fake humility trying to seem real. That's just another performance, and people sense it instantly. The move is simpler. Stop hiding the real work your life requires. Let them see you're tired sometimes. Let them know you're trying. That honest showing, more than any polished image, is what pulls people closer and keeps them there. Status through indifference. You've noticed it with people who don't seem to care whether you like them or not. They're relaxed, playful. They laugh at their own jokes even if you don't. They make plans without running them by you first. And somehow, everyone wants to be around them more. The paradox cuts deep. The moment you stop trying to manage how someone sees you, they start seeing you differently. Indifference isn't cold withdrawal or petty games. It's genuine comfort with your own company, and people can sense that from across the room. When you're not performing for approval, you're no longer a supplicant. You're a peer, maybe even someone with something they want. Real status isn't about credentials or money on display. It's about the frequency of your attention and where you choose to direct it. High-status people give their attention deliberately to things and people they select, not to anyone who asks. They're building their own world, and they'll show up for you, but they won't orbit you. This flips the whole dynamic. Suddenly, you're the one wondering if you're interesting enough. You find yourself trying harder because they clearly weren't trying at all. The dangerous move is performing indifference that reads as cold and fails instantly, but genuine indifference, the kind that comes from actually knowing your own value and having real competing priorities, that becomes magnetic. People don't want someone desperate for their approval. They want someone who already knows their worth and is casually curious whether you're worth their time too. The trick is, you have to believe it first. You have to actually be building something worth being indifferent about. Frame control in conversation. You're sitting across from someone and they're telling you about their bad day. You nod, you sympathize, and then they ask your opinion. The moment you answer, something shifts. Suddenly, they're defending their position instead of listening to you. You didn't attack them. You didn't contradict them hard, but you offered a different frame and they felt the walls go up. That's frame control, and it's happening in every conversation you have. A frame is the invisible story that defines what something means. Same event, totally different meaning depending on whose frame wins. If your boss says, "We need to talk," You might frame it as criticism. They might frame it as collaboration. If someone cancels plans, you frame it as rejection. They frame it as self-care. The person who controls the frame doesn't have to control the conversation. They control what the conversation means. People are drawn to those who present frames with quiet confidence, not aggression. When you meet uncertainty with a clear interpretation delivered without needing agreement, you become the anchor. They organize their thinking around yours. Most people hand over their frame the moment they feel confused or unsteady, looking for someone to make sense of the chaos. The trap is forcing it. Heavy-handed frame control reads as arrogance and triggers resistance. Light frame control, where you simply speak as if your interpretation is obvious, creates gravitational pull. Next time you're in a conversation, notice which frame is running. Is it theirs? Is it yours? Or is there a collision? That awareness alone shifts the power. Not because you're manipulating, because you're conscious of what's actually happening. Interrogative silence pressure. You ask a question and someone goes quiet. Not a beat, a real pause. Your nervous system does something interesting in those 2 seconds. It treats silence after a question like a debt. Something was asked of them and they haven't paid yet. That unpaid attention pulls at you harder than a direct answer ever would. The brain hates open loops, so you fill the gap by trying harder, speaking more, leaning in. You've just handed them all the power without knowing it. This is interrogative silence pressure, and it's one of the sharpest tools in attraction because it flips who's chasing whom. When you ask and then actually wait, not nervously, not desperately, but like you genuinely have nowhere else to be, something shifts. The other person feels the weight of their own silence. They sense they've been given space to fill, and that space becomes uncomfortable in a specific way, not hostile, but expectant. It activates a subtle obligation. People want to break silence more than they want to break eye contact. So when you ask something real and then hold still, you're not being quiet. You're being present in a way that makes them want to fill the void with themselves. The dark part. This only works if you're genuinely unbothered by their answer. The moment you need them to fill that silence, the pressure reverses and you're the desperate one again. Real interrogative silence is built on actual disinterest. Ask something that matters to you, then practice being okay with whatever comes back or nothing at all. Silence tolerance as a test. Watch someone's hands during a text conversation. If they're typing and deleting, waiting for your reply without sending anything, that's someone in distress. Most people feel silence like breathing. A 2-hour gap without a message triggers panic. A conversation pauses and they're already scrambling for a joke, a compliment, a question, anything to plug the quiet. They can't sit in the space between you without rushing to fix it. That urgency is data. It tells you how much control they need, how much they fear losing you, how much your validation anchors them. When someone can actually sit with you in a quiet room, wait for your reply without spiraling, or let you take your time without demanding reassurance, something shifts. They don't confuse silence with abandonment. Presence, to them, doesn't require constant noise. The people most attracted to you handle your silence best, not because they don't care, but because they're secure enough in their own thoughts while you're gone. They're not performing. They're not anxious texting proof of interest. They're just there, and that steadiness matters more than any string of words ever could. So when you meet someone who breaks every silence, who treats your quietness like a threat, who can't let a conversation breathe. Watch what's underneath. It's usually insecurity dressed as enthusiasm, need dressed as genuine interest, anxiety dressed as affection that performs into exhaustion eventually. The ones you actually want are the ones comfortable in the space, the ones who give you silence back without needing to fill it with proof or reassurance or constant validation. That's the filter nobody talks about, and it runs deeper than attraction. It runs into staying power, pausing as power. Someone says something that stings. Your instinct fires immediately. Defend, explain, overcorrect. But watch what happens in the half second before you speak. That gap is where the pull lives. Most people fill silence the moment it arrives because silence feels like losing, like the other person has the last word or the upper hand. They talk faster, louder, more frantically. They give you everything, and in doing that, they hand you the entire dynamic. A pause, a real one, 3 seconds of actual quiet while your eyes stay calm and your expression stays level, tells the other person something their nervous system understands immediately. You are not threatened. You are not scrambling. You are not desperate for them to understand you right now. That stillness is magnetic because desperation is the inverse. When you wait, they start talking to fill the void. They start explaining themselves, seeking your approval, trying to convince you. The power shifts without you saying a word. It works in conflict, in negotiation, in seduction, in job interviews, anywhere two nervous systems are trying to figure out who is okay and who is panicking. The people who seem most compelling, least needy, most secure, half their power comes from being willing to let silence breathe. You do not have to be witty or impressive in those pauses. You just have to not flinch. That is the whole thing. Next time someone pushes or tests or waits for your response, count to 3 in your head before you open your mouth. Feel how different it is. Feel how they lean in. Speech rate and authority. You've probably noticed this without knowing its name. The person who talks slowly in a room full of fast talkers suddenly becomes the one everyone leans toward. There's almost a magnetic pull to it. Meanwhile, the fastest talker, the one cycling through words like a nervous auctioneer, gets heard but not really listened to. Speech rate works on your nervous system before your conscious mind even catches it. When someone talks slowly, your brain assumes they have time. They're not rushed. They know something worth pausing for. Your nervous system mirrors it. You slow down. You listen harder. It's not the words themselves. It's the space between them. Fast speech signals urgency, anxiety, or that the speaker doesn't quite trust their own material. Slow speech signals control, confidence, something worthy of full attention. The thing is, it doesn't matter what they're actually saying. A charismatic con artist knows this better than most honest people. They've weaponized pace with surgical precision, watching how the room shifts when they drop their tempo. Lower your speech rate by just 10 or 15% below the room's baseline and watch what happens to how you're perceived. Not glacially slow, that reads as condescending or robotic, but deliberate, measured. Like each word is being chosen instead of spilling out. You're not hurrying to prove anything. The irony is that slower speech often makes you sound smarter, more trustworthy, and more magnetic, even when you're saying the exact same thing a rushed version of you would say. Your voice is authority made audible. Use it like you know something they need to hear, and they will lean in to find out what it is. Vocal pitch dominance cues. Listen to a room full of people and you'll hear it immediately. The ones who own the space don't sound rushed. Their voices drop. They don't fill silence. Silence fills around them. That's pitch dominance, and it's working on everyone in earshot before a single idea lands. A low, steady voice gets interrupted less, believed faster, and held longer. Men with deeper registers are rated as more trustworthy, more competent, more sexually viable. Women with lower voices gain authority but often pay a social price for it, trapped in a double bind where power sounds unfeminine. The root is ancient biology. Testosterone deepens the voice, so low pitch whispers to your nervous system that this person has resources, health, and can protect something worth protecting. Your guard drops without you knowing why. But here's where it gets strategic. Most people unconsciously shift their pitch based on who's in the room. You raise yours when you're nervous or seeking approval. You lower it when you want to claim space. The people around you feel that shift even if they can't name it. The ones who keep their register steady and low, who never sound pleading, never sound urgent, gain something asymmetric. They seem unmoved by the room's temperature, indifferent to whether you believe them. That unshakable calm becomes contagious. It broadcasts, "I don't need your validation for this to be true." Magnetic attraction feeds on exactly that kind of certainty. In your next high-stakes conversation, try speaking half a step lower than you normally would, not performed but deliberate, and watch people lean in instead of back away. Stillness in the voice is a form of power, vocal fry, and perceived warmth. Listen the next time someone you trust speaks to you in a hushed moment. Notice if their voice drops into that creaky, breathy register at the end of a sentence. That's vocal fry, and it does something strange to the brain. Research shows that when someone uses vocal fry sparingly, listeners perceive them as more intimate, more human, less polished and distant. You don't trust the news anchor with the perfect broadcast voice the same way you trust the friend whose voice cracks slightly when they're being real with you. Vocal fry signals lowered guards. It says vulnerability without saying it in words. The psychology is elegant. We associate that rough, creaky sound with someone who isn't performing, who's let the mask slip just enough to let you in. But here's where attraction gets interesting. Overuse flattens the effect into monotone boredom, which kills desire instantly. The warmth comes from variation, not from living in that register. If every sentence ends in fry, you sound exhausted or detached. The magic happens when someone moves fluidly between registers, dipping into vocal fry only when the moment demands genuine feeling. That selective vulnerability, the choice to crack slightly, is what hooks people at a neurological level. It's the auditory equivalent of making eye contact right before you say something that matters. The listener's brain registers it as real. Next time you're in a conversation where you want to feel closer, let your voice find its lower register on the words that actually mean something. Don't perform warmth. Let it crack through instead. The difference is everything. Misattribution of arousal. You're walking through a canyon with someone you find moderately attractive. Your heart is pounding. Your palms are damp. You feel electric. The canyon walls are steep and the drop is real. Your nervous system is doing its job, flooding you with adrenaline. But your brain doesn't care about the geology. It feels the arousal, sees the person standing next to you, and builds a story. This person is making me feel alive. You must be drawn to them. The arousal gets credited to attraction when it actually came from fear, danger, or exertion. This is misattribution, and it is brutally effective because your body cannot tell the difference between types of activation. A first date at a theme park, a late-night conversation during a crisis, even a heated argument. Any high-energy moment can feel like chemistry when it is really just biochemistry. The person learns to associate you with feeling intensely present, with their nervous system lighting up, with that surge of being fully conscious. They think they want you. They actually want the feeling. And here is what makes this dark. You can engineer this. Suggest activities that create genuine arousal, heights, speed, competition, even mild confrontation, not manufactured drama, but real activation. Their brain will wire you into the reward system, cementing the neural pathway between your presence and their aliveness. They will chase you not because of who you are, but because of what your presence triggers in their body. They become addicted to the state, not the person, and they will not know the difference. The canyon becomes you. Shared adrenaline bonding. You've probably noticed something strange. The person who makes your heart race, palms sweat, adrenaline flooding, the one you fight with in the moment, sometimes becomes someone you crave being near more than ever. Not because the conflict resolved, because you survived it together. That neurochemical rush, the spike of cortisol and adrenaline followed by the crash when it's over, creates a biological adhesive your nervous system can't ignore. It doesn't distinguish between danger and intensity. It only knows this person was there when you were flooded, and together you came through. That's the hook. It's why people stay in chaotic relationships longer than logic allows, why a near-death experience with someone bonds deeper than a year of stability, why shared trauma can feel like a private language nobody else speaks. The adrenaline rewires your brain to associate that person with survival, with being seen in your rawest state. When you introduce deliberate intensity into attraction, a dangerous conversation, a risky outing, an argument followed by reconciliation, you're borrowing the body's own glue. The other person becomes not just someone you like, but someone your nervous system has learned to trust during activation. That neurological stamp runs deeper than comfort ever could. Here's the catch. Recognizing when you're drawn to someone purely because they flood your fight or flight response, because they make you feel alive in ways safety never does. That intensity will fade, and it always does. The real question is whether anything exists underneath when the adrenaline drains, or if the bond dissolves the moment the danger passes. Watch for it in yourself, because the pull feels like love when it's actually just your body learning to depend on the rush. Novelty as arousal fuel. You know that moment when someone surprises you, not with a gift, but with a sudden shift in how they carry themselves, a joke you didn't expect, a confession that reframes everything. Your nervous system lights up, attention narrows. Suddenly, they feel alive to you in a way they didn't 5 minutes ago. That jolt is novelty, and it's one of the most primal engines of attraction. Your brain runs on prediction. Most of the day, it's on autopilot, matching patterns, assuming the next hour will look like the last. Boredom isn't just dull, it's neurologically sleeping. But novelty breaks that prediction. It forces your brain to wake up and pay attention because the familiar person just did something unfamiliar. The unpredictable text back, the rare vulnerability, the sudden confidence shift, the hidden talent mentioned in passing. Each rupture in what you thought you knew triggers a dopamine spike, the same neurochemical that underpins desire. This is why long-term attraction often requires novelty injection, not drama, not games, but genuine surprise. A partner who stays exactly the same, predictable in every way, stops competing for your attention. Your brain has mapped them, but someone who keeps showing you new edges, new depths, new ways of being, stays unpredictable enough to keep your system engaged. The trap is thinking novelty means performance or pretense. It doesn't. It means staying curious about yourself, letting people see different sides of who you actually are, resisting the comfortable prison of a fixed persona. Reveal yourself slowly, in layers, through honesty, and you stay novel not through artifice, but through the genuine unfolding of who you are. Habituation kills desire. You know that feeling when a song plays on the radio for the 100th time and suddenly it's just background noise? Your brain literally stops noticing it. Neurologically, your sensory neurons stop firing the same way they did the first time you heard it. That's habituation, the silent assassin of attraction. The same mechanism that makes a banger feel boring is exactly what flattens the spark between two people. Early on, everything is novel. Her laugh, the way he looks at you, text exchanges at midnight. Your nervous system floods with dopamine because your brain is saying, alert, new information, potential mate discovered, but then something inevitable happens. You see each other regularly. The surprise dissolves. Her laugh becomes an expected rhythm. His gaze becomes routine. Your brain has filed her away as known territory and stops releasing the chemical cocktail that made your chest tighten. This is not a flaw in love. It's how human perception works. We are designed to stop noticing the constant. The real trap is mistaking habituation for loss of connection. You no longer get butterflies, so you assume the spark is gone. You start looking elsewhere for that novelty hit, chasing the first date rush with someone new. But neuroscience reveals something sharper. Desire doesn't vanish. It requires interruption. Novelty doesn't mean new people. It means new contexts, unpredictability, moments that wake your brain back up to the person already beside you. The couples who sustain attraction don't become more compatible. They get strategically strange with each other again. They interrupt the habituation loop before it hardens into indifference, and that choice to stay unfamiliar is what keeps current alive. Optimal distance regulation. Watch what happens when someone you care about becomes scarce, not cruel or distant, just busy, unreachable for a few days, then suddenly back. Your mind does something wild. It fills the gap with theories. Maybe they're thinking about you. Maybe you matter more than you thought. The absence rewrites the story. This is the dark, open secret of desire. People don't want you more because you're always there. They want you more because you're not. When you're permanent furniture in someone's life, they stop noticing you. The brain is built to filter out the constant. But when you vanish and reappear, you're news again. You're a question they want answered. And the thing is, this isn't manipulation if you mean it. It's just the physics of attention and scarcity working as they always do. The people who magnetize others understand a quiet rhythm. They're warm and present when they show up, but they also have lives that don't orbit around the other person. They have projects, friendships, time that belongs to them. That genuine scarcity of attention, not performed coldness, but real scarcity, makes you worth pursuing instead of taking for granted. Most people collapse into one extreme. They cling until someone retreats hard, or they stay so distant that nobody bothers. The magnetic middle is narrower. You're engaged and warm without being available on demand. You care without needing constant reciprocation to feel okay. You're present without being there all the time. When someone knows you could be doing something else, your time stops being a default and becomes a choice they made. That shift changes everything. Withdrawal after warmth. You're texting back and forth, laughing at jokes, trading real things about your day. Then one day you go quiet. You answer slower. You're still kind, but the spark feels dimmer. The other person notices immediately, and now they're the one chasing. This breaks the pattern they thought was forming. They had started to believe in the consistency, the availability, the specialness of talking to you. The sudden shift makes them wonder what changed, what they did, whether they still matter. The brain hates that uncertainty more than it hates rejection. Rejection is clean. You can move on, but ambiguity keeps you spinning, replaying, reaching. The neurochemistry is real. You've already triggered the dopamine reward system, and then you cut the supply. That creates craving. The body experiences withdrawal the way it would from any habit, any substance you've come to depend on. But here's where most people miss the trap. If you weaponize this intentionally every time, if withdrawal becomes your playbook, you stop being interesting and start being exhausting. People sense the pattern eventually. They feel manipulated. They realize the push-pull isn't mystery. It's control dressed up as depth. The real art lives somewhere else. Withdrawal only works when it's spontaneous, rooted in your actual life, not a calculated script you're running. Sometimes you're distant because you're genuinely preoccupied, redirecting your energy towards something that matters, living a life that doesn't need constant connection to feel real. That authenticity is what magnetizes. The difference between mysterious and cold is whether there's an actual person behind the withdrawal, a real world, real stakes, real priorities, not just a cold algorithm waiting to ping them back. Let your absence mean something because your presence already does. Fluency versus friction attraction. There's a weird moment early on when someone becomes either too easy to read or impossible to predict, and you'd think easy would always win. It doesn't. Someone whose every move you can anticipate, whose jokes land on schedule, whose responses feel smooth and automatic, often becomes less magnetizing over time. The mind stops searching. Boredom arrives quietly, but bring in friction, a delay, a contradiction, an unexpected response to something you thought you knew. And suddenly, the other person becomes more real, more dimensional, harder to solve. You lean in. This isn't about playing hard to get in the manipulative sense. It's about your brain being a prediction machine that gets bored when it stops predicting. Someone too fluent, too readable, too perfectly aligned with your expectations becomes a solved puzzle. The attraction flattens because there's nothing left to chase in your own mind. But someone with texture, who sometimes agrees, sometimes pushes back, who laughs at something unexpected, who has tastes you don't immediately understand, keeps the system active. You're constantly revising your map of them, which means you're constantly thinking about them. The trap is mistaking friction for genuine incompatibility or cruelty. Real friction isn't cold or withholding or deliberately difficult. It's about being complex enough that you can't reduce someone to a formula. It's about letting your full, contradictory, sometimes confusing self show up without editing it down to placate someone else. The people who magnetize others aren't the ones who've perfected the performance. They're the ones who've stopped performing altogether, who've learned that mystery isn't manufactured. It's just what happens when you stop trying so hard to be liked. Anchoring first impressions. You walk into a room and someone's already decided what you are within the first 15 seconds, not because you've done anything yet, but because of what they saw or heard right before you arrived. That first detail, that opening image, becomes the anchor. Everything that follows gets measured against it, and most people won't even realize they're doing it. If the barista before you was rude, your smile gets read as fake. If the conversation before you was brilliant, your ordinary joke lands like genius. The anchor is already set, and you're working inside someone else's frame, whether you know it or not. What makes this dark is that people who understand anchoring can weaponize the setup. They introduce you after mentioning something impressive they did, and suddenly you look like you're in their league. Or they slip in a small insult dressed as a compliment right before you speak, and everything you say feels defensive. The mind doesn't fact-check anchors. It uses them like a shortcut. So here's what matters. You want to know what anchor just fired before you arrived in the space. Did they just have a win or a loss? Did someone else just charm them or disappoint them? That single data point explains half of why they're reading you the way they are. And if you're building attraction, sometimes the smartest move isn't what you say. It's understanding what frame you're already standing inside and whether you work within it or quietly shift it by being unexpectedly different from the pattern they were just anchored to. Contrast principle framing. Walk into a room where someone has just been loud, arguing, taking up all the space. Then you enter, quiet, measured, genuinely listening. Suddenly, you feel magnetic, not because you're more interesting than they are, but because of what came before you. That's the contrast principle at work, and it's wired so deep in human neurology that you'll spot it everywhere once you start looking. The brain doesn't measure things in isolation. It measures them against the immediate context. A cold room makes a lukewarm one feel hot. A boring conversation makes a witty one feel brilliant. A person who cancels plans twice makes someone reliable feel like a saint. You could be the exact same version of yourself in two different rooms, but if you come after someone exhausting, you become irresistible by comparison, not through any effort of your own. Here's the darker part. You don't need to be exceptional at anything. You just need to position yourself against the right baseline. If everyone she's dated was emotionally unavailable, your genuine text messages hit differently. If everyone in his life demands constantly, your calm presence becomes a refuge. You can manufacture this contrast intentionally, show up different from her last partner, be the opposite of what she's tired of. The stickier truth is that retention happens when the contrast is genuine. Eventually, you become the baseline she measures everyone else against, and that's when you stop being attractive and start being essential. Peak and rule memory. You took someone to dinner last month. The meal was fine, nothing special, decent wine, decent talk. But then the waiter messed up the check, and you both laughed at the absurdity of it. That moment landed hard. Now, when they think about the night, they don't picture the middle. They picture you both laughing, and they want to see you again. That's the peak end rule working in your favor, and it explains why people's memories of time with you rarely match what actually happened. Your brain doesn't store a full video of an experience. Instead, it takes snapshots, the most intense moment, the peak, and the final moment, the end, and uses those two frames to judge everything else. The middle hours disappear. This matters enormously if you want to be remembered as magnetic, because it means you don't have to be perfect the whole time. You can be ordinary, even slightly off, and it won't touch their final impression. What matters is engineering those last few minutes. End on laughter. End with a genuine moment of connection. End with something they'll want to extend. People who understand this don't try to dazzle for 3 hours straight. That's exhausting, and it backfires. They orchestrate the peaks and then engineer the exit. A real goodbye, eye contact, something that lingers. The memory of you won't be the whole night. It will be the moment they felt most alive with you and the feeling they had when you left. Designed for that, and you become the person everyone wants to spend time with again. Reminiscence bump imprinting. You probably have a song you heard at 17, 22, maybe 25, and it hits different. Not because it's objectively better than the music you love now. It's better because it got tangled up in who you were becoming. Neuroscience calls this the reminiscence bump, a window in late adolescence and early adulthood when memories stick harder, burn deeper, and shape identity more than memories from any other decade of your life. The person you were absorbing that music, that breakup, that conversation at 3 in the morning, that person was still building their taste, their values, their sense of self. And whatever touched you then became part of the template. This matters for attraction because the person who reminds someone of their younger self, their music taste, their recklessness, their idealism, activates more than just nostalgia. You are activating their identity foundation. You are mirroring the version of them that felt most alive, most themselves, most possible. They don't just find you attractive, they find you like coming home to who they used to be. The trap is that people confuse this with real compatibility. They mistake the echo of their own imprinting for a genuine match. So the person who unconsciously mirrors someone's formative years can hold almost supernatural leverage, not because you are special, but because you are familiar in a way their nervous system learned to trust before their rational mind got involved. Knowing this shifts the game. You're not competing on who you are. You're competing on whose foundational story you're allowed to remind them of. Mere exposure warming. You walk past someone's desk every morning for 2 weeks without saying a word. Then one day they smile at you first. It feels like something shifted, but nothing actually happened. You just became familiar. That's mere exposure in action. Repeated contact without interaction breeds comfort, and comfort feels like connection. The brain reads familiarity as safety and safety as liking. It's not rational. It's not even about who you are yet. It's just that your face stopped being a stranger's face. Here's where this gets interesting for attraction. People conflate familiarity with warmth all the time. You show up consistently, same coffee shop, same gym, same group chat, and suddenly you're the person everyone gravitates toward, not because you're special, because you're there. The repetition does the heavy lifting. Your presence becomes the baseline. You become the person they're used to, and used to feels safe, and safe feels like trust. 3 weeks of regular visibility can shift someone's entire emotional response to you. The dark part is straightforward. You can weaponize this. Proximity builds affection faster than most people realize. A text every few days, showing up to the same spaces, being reliably visible. It sounds small, but it compounds. The person doesn't fall for you because they discovered you're amazing. They fall for you because your face is the one their brain stopped treating as a threat. Comfort masquerades as attraction so convincingly that they won't know the difference. The advantage for you is knowing that showing up matters more than being perfect. Consistency rewrites the story faster than charisma ever will. Proximity, familiarity trap. There's someone you see every single day at the coffee shop, the gym, the office hallway, and somewhere in the last few weeks, they stopped feeling like a stranger. You haven't really talked, nothing happened between you, yet your nervous system has already decided this person is safe, familiar, maybe even attractive. Your brain is doing something sneaky. It's confusing exposure with genuine connection. The more you encounter someone, the more your body relaxes around them, and that ease, that neurological comfort can masquerade as real attraction. Your lizard brain runs a simple calculation. Familiar equals safe, and safe equals desirable. The mere exposure effect is so powerful, it can make you genuinely want someone you barely know, all because you've crossed paths enough times for your brain to stop treating them as a threat. Here's where the darker edge emerges. People who understand this can weaponize proximity with eerie precision. The coworker who's always nearby, the friend who keeps engineering reasons to be in your space, the person who shows up consistently. They're not necessarily doing anything obviously wrong, but they're stacking the psychological deck against your better judgment. Every casual encounter, every coincidental bump-in, you're building unconscious comfort in thin layers. Your attraction grows not because they've actually earned it, but because they've been patient, strategic, and relentlessly present. The effect compounds dramatically when you're isolated or lonely. Proximity becomes your entire social universe. The real trap is how you'll rationalize it afterward, crafting a story that makes the feelings seem inevitable. You'll forget they were a complete stranger weeks ago. Watch for this pattern in yourself, especially when you're drawn to someone who primarily offers availability rather than genuine connection. Propinquity through routine. There is a barista who knows your order before you say it, a coworker whose laugh you recognize from 3 desks away, someone on your morning run who always nods at the same corner. None of these people are chasing you. They are not trying to charm you or perform attraction. They are simply there, regularly, in the small grooves of your day. And that repetition, that sheer physical presence, does something your brain cannot resist. This is propinquity, the idea that proximity and repeated exposure create emotional closeness without effort. It sounds almost too simple to matter, but it cuts through every trick, every text game, every calculated opener. When you show up consistently, you stop being a novelty and start being part of someone's internal landscape. Their nervous system learns you. Their memory files you as safe, familiar, worth noticing. The dark side is that this works even when you do nothing special. You do not need charisma or perfect timing. You just need to occupy the same space with enough regularity that your face becomes expected, that your absence becomes noticeable. A terrible person can trigger propinquity just as easily as someone genuine. So here is the real trap. If you want to be magnetic, make yourself a fixture, not by pursuing or texting, but by building a life with predictable rhythms that intersect with theirs. Same cafe, same time, same gym class, same social circles. The attraction that builds in that context feels organic to them, like they chose it, even though their brain was simply conditioned by exposure and familiarity. You become less a stranger and more a feature of their world. Similarity attraction principle. You walk into a room and instantly lock eyes with someone wearing the same obscure band t-shirt you own. Suddenly they feel familiar, safe, even magnetic. That is not accident. It is neuroscience wearing the skin of coincidence. We are drawn to people who mirror us back, and the strange thing is, the more we find in common, the less we have to negotiate who we are. There is no translation layer, no code switching, no exhausting performance of a self we think someone else will accept. The similarity principle runs deeper than shared taste. It travels through values, humor rhythms, even the speed at which you talk. When someone laughs at your jokes the way you laugh, fast, sharp, knowing, it feels like recognition, like they get you without you having to explain the joke 3 times. This matters in attraction because it solves a primal problem. Compatibility is expensive. It requires time, vulnerability, and the risk of rejection. But if someone is already like you, the courtship feels shorter. The guardrails come down faster. The ease is intoxicating. Here is where it darkens, though. People who feel similar to you are not always good for you. You can share the same anxiety, the same toxic family patterns, the same self-destructive habits. Two people who both avoid conflict will never fight. They will just quietly build resentment until it becomes a third person in the room. So similarity feels like home, but sometimes home is a trap. Before you let someone's mirror image familiarity seduce you, ask, which parts of me do I actually want reflected back? That question changes everything. Complementarity of dominance. Watch a sharp executive choose a gentle artist, or notice how the controlling partner gravitates towards someone who won't fight back. We don't pick people who mirror our psychological shape. We pick people who complete it, who fill the space where we're empty. When you're high in dominance, your nervous system learns to crave the relief of submission. When you're cautious and deferring, a decisive hand on your back feels like permission to stop thinking, like finally someone else will carry the weight. This isn't love at first sight. It's a fit, like puzzle pieces that sigh when they lock together. The person you're magnetized to isn't the one who looks like you or thinks like you. They're the counterbalance your body has been searching for, the missing half of a seesaw. A dominant person can exhaust themselves leading. Meeting someone who wants to follow isn't weakness. It's physics. It's rest. A passive person can go half mad with indecision. A partner who knows what they want becomes a life raft. This is why people sometimes stay in relationships that objectively don't work. The complementarity still sings. Your nervous system recognized itself in them, recognized home. But here's the trap. Complementarity can become codependency in a single season. When you need someone else's dominance to feel safe or someone else's submission to feel powerful, you're not in a relationship. You're in a contract, a mutual addiction disguised as love. The attraction is neurologically real, but it's built on you being incomplete. The hard part isn't recognizing what completes you. It's learning to be whole first. That's when real choice appears. Authoritative mating calibration. Walk into a bar and watch what happens, not to the room, but to the internal math happening in everyone's head at once. Your brain is running a constant self-assessment, comparing your attractiveness, status, earning potential, and neurotic baseline against everyone around you, then narrowing your pool to people who score somewhere in your league. It's less romantic than it sounds, and way more strategic than most of us admit. The science is blunt. We calibrate. Someone unusually beautiful might feel out of reach before they ever look your way. Someone struggling financially might feel safer, more predictable, but here's where the real leverage lives. That calibration isn't fixed concrete. It shifts based on context, confidence, and how badly you want someone. Walk into a room feeling like the most competent person there, and your range suddenly widens. You start seeing options you didn't notice before, and suddenly those options notice you back. Conversely, after rejection or a confidence hit, people recalibrate downward fast, settling for less than they deserve without realizing it. The trap is this: if you never challenge your calibration, you'll keep attracting the same patterns, the same mediocre matches, the same dead-end cycles. Someone who thinks they're average will filter out genuinely good matches automatically, long before those matches get a real chance to matter. The move is deliberate and unglamorous. Stop letting old feedback about your worth run the screening process. Test your actual range. Ask someone out who makes you slightly nervous. You might be shocked what happens when you stop pre-rejecting yourself before the game even starts. Mate value discrepancy tension. You know the feeling. Standing next to someone who could walk away tomorrow and land on their feet, while you both know you couldn't say the same thing. That asymmetry, when one person is objectively more desired, has better options, or simply fits the market better, creates a friction that doesn't vanish just because the affection is real. The higher value partner oscillates between boredom, they could replace this, and invisible pressure. The stakes feel one-sided. The lower value partner swings between gratitude and resentment. They're acutely aware they're the luckier one, and that awareness erodes authenticity like rust. It's not crude to notice this. It's how attraction and scarcity actually function. What makes it dark is how the discrepancy gets weaponized, sometimes deliberately, sometimes not. The higher value partner pulls back, creating artificial scarcity within the relationship itself, testing whether the other person will chase harder. The lower value partner either becomes hypervigilant, scanning for betrayal, or numbs out and stops trying. Both stay tense because neither can pretend the imbalance doesn't exist, and pretending is often the only way to feel safe in an uneven dynamic. The relationships that actually hold are the ones willing to name it directly, not as shame, but as fact, or the ones where the value equation flips, where the lower value partner does something remarkable and suddenly becomes more desired. That temporary reversal, even brief, can crack the tension and remind both people what reciprocal attraction feels like. The real trap is silence about it. Silence makes resentment thicken into something corrosive. Even one honest conversation about the imbalance can shift the whole dynamic. Eye contact threshold play. You've felt it before, that moment someone holds your gaze just half a second longer than feels normal, and suddenly your nervous system wakes up, your breath shifts. There's a small electric current between you. That's not accident, that's threshold play, and it's one of the most potent tools in quiet attraction because it lives in that suspended space between safety and intensity. Most people break eye contact first. They're trained to. Eye contact feels vulnerable, almost rude if you hold it too long. So when someone doesn't look away, when they sit in that discomfort with you without flinching, your brain registers something rare: presence, control, the willingness to be seen and to see you without apology. The threshold is the edge, right before it becomes uncomfortable. You lock eyes for maybe 2 seconds longer than her friends would, long enough to register. Not so long it feels aggressive or staged. Then you break first, slowly, like you chose to. This teaches her something. You're comfortable with intensity, but you don't need to dominate it. You can sit in the uncomfortable without needing to escape or prove something. The play happens because you're constantly reading that line. One conversation you might hold just a beat longer. The next time, you look away slightly earlier. You're never predictable. You're never desperately seeking her eyes. That unpredictability keeps her wondering if that extra second meant something or if she imagined the warmth. That wondering is the whole game. She'll start holding your gaze longer, testing you, trying to decode what you meant. That's when you know it's working. Triangular gaze pattern. Watch how someone's eyes move when they're genuinely drawn to you. Most people lock into the same narrow band, face to mouth, mouth back to face, a tight rectangle that never finds rest. The triangular pattern breaks that entirely. You anchor your gaze on one of their eyes, let it drift slowly across to the other eye, then down to their mouth, then back up to meet their gaze again. Not mechanical, not staring. A slow, deliberate triangle traced across their face, 3, maybe 4 seconds to complete the full path. Your brain recognizes this exact sequence from someone deciding whether to kiss you. Your neurology picks it up before conscious thought even arrives, triggering intimate assessment. Not threat, not indifference, something far more specific. The person across from you will feel seen in a way that's almost physical. Their pupils dilate, their breathing shifts without intention. They become hyper-aware of their own mouth, their own face. the space between you. You're not being predatory because the movement is slow and open, unhurried and deliberate, not fixated or hungry. Permission lives in the slowness itself. Predators stare hard and fast. Lovers move with patience. Do this once or twice in a conversation where chemistry already exists, and you'll watch them mirror it back. They'll study you the same way, the same patient triangle. That mutual recognition is the nonverbal agreement that something is possible between you. It works because it's honest. You're literally showing them the path your attention would take if intimacy were already real. No calculation, just clarity. Breaking gaze downward. Watch what happens the moment someone looks away first. Not casually, not because they're distracted, but deliberately down toward their hands or lap after holding your eyes. That small drop is not weakness, it's surrender. And surrender, in the language of attraction, reads like vulnerability wrapped in trust. Most people think holding a stare wins the room. Wrong. Breaking it at precisely the right moment, softly downward, wins the nervous system of the person across from you. Your eyes locked, theirs still on you. Then you dip your gaze, maybe half a second too long. That pause does something. It says you were confident enough to look and secure enough to look away first. It's the opposite of the dominance game. It's the subtle play of someone who doesn't need to prove they're watching. The physics of this are real. When you break eye contact downward, never sideways, never up, you activate the other person's parasympathetic nervous system. Their body reads it as safe, intimate, like you're letting them see something tender. This works in conversation, across a table, in a crowded room where everyone else is fighting for attention with their eyes locked open. You're the one who breathes first. You're the one who trusts the other person enough to be the first to soften. That asymmetry, you calm, them still reaching, is magnetic. The next time you're in a charged moment, try it. Hold the gaze steady, then let your eyes drift down to her hands or down to the table between you. Hold it there for one full breath, then look back. That one small gesture rewires what she thinks she felt. Blink rate and interest. Watch someone's eyes during the first 10 seconds of a conversation they didn't ask for, then watch them during one they're deeply engaged in. The difference isn't subtle. When someone genuinely leans in, their blinks slow down. When they're bored or defensive, those eyelids start flickering like a strobe light. It's not a conscious choice. It's your nervous system deciding whether to keep the external world in or shut it out. The reason blinks drop during interest is neurological. Deep focus narrows your visual field and dampens reflexive responses. Your brain is treating what's in front of you as worth missing other things for. The person who's genuinely fascinated by you will literally stop blinking at normal speed. Meanwhile, someone faking it or uncomfortable will blink faster, sometimes dramatically so, as if their eyes are trying to escape what they're seeing. Most people have no idea they're doing this. A woman who's genuinely hooked might drop her blink rate to half its normal speed without knowing it. A man who's performing interest but feeling threatened will speed up without catching himself. You can't manufacture a blink rate. It's automatic, buried in your brainstem, immune to social performance and rehearsal. It won't obey your script. The eyelid doesn't lie because it can't afford to. So, if you're testing whether someone's actually present or just being polite, stop reading their words. Read their lids instead. If they're slowing down, they're downloading you, taking you in, filtering out noise because you have become signal. If they're speeding up, they're already planning their exit, running through the door in their mind before their feet move. The body always tells the truth first. Pupil dilation feedback loop. When someone's pupils expand as they look at you, they're watching their own body betray interest in real time. That widening isn't a choice, it's pure physiology, your sympathetic nervous system saying yes before your mouth knows what to say. But the moment they notice that dilation, something architectural happens in their brain. They catch themselves being attracted to you, and that self-awareness creates a feedback loop. Their mind reads the signal their eyes are sending and interprets it as evidence of genuine desire, which makes the desire itself feel more real, which dilates the pupils further. You didn't manufacture attraction so much as you became the mirror they're watching themselves fall into. What makes this recursive is that it works best in the fog of naturalness. The second someone intellectualizes it, oh, my pupils are dilating, so I must be attracted, they've stepped outside the moment into performance, and the whole thing flattens. Authenticity evaporates like breath on cold glass. But if you understand the mechanism without weaponizing it, you move differently. You hold eye contact a beat longer because you're genuinely present, not because you're counting. You let silences breathe. You don't interrupt the small moments where two nervous systems are actually talking to each other. Your own pupils dilate when you're interested, when you're actually there, when curiosity is doing the work instead of strategy. That mutual widening, that synchrony, that's what people feel in their bones and come back for. Not the technique disguised as connection, but the realness underneath it. The bodies don't perform well. They're terrible liars, and the nervous systems reading them know the difference between the mirror and the real thing. Micro-expression leakage. Watch someone lie to you, really lie, not just a white one, and you'll see something flicker across their face for maybe a fifth of a second. They say they're fine, their mouth says fine, but their eyes, their jaw, the corners of their mouth all just betrayed them in a microsecond before they could pull the mask back on. That flash is called micro-expression leakage, and it's one of the few honest things a face will do when the person behind it is trying hard not to be truthful. The human face has 43 muscles, and they move in patterns we don't consciously control. When you're suppressing something, fear, disgust, contempt, anger, those emotions still fire up in the nervous system, and they have to go somewhere. They leak out before your prefrontal cortex can slam the door shut. This matters in attraction because people are far more attuned to these leaks than you'd think, especially when they're trying to read you. Someone wondering if you actually like them will scan your face for that moment of truth. Are you flinching slightly when they mention their ex? Did your eye just narrow when they said something stupid? Did contempt flash across your face when they touched your arm? The people who seem magnetic don't usually hide these leaks. They've just trained themselves to genuinely feel different things. They've actually changed what's underneath, so there's nothing to leak. If you want to seem more attractive and trustworthy, stop trying to fake interest or warmth and actually shift what you think about the person in front of you. The face will follow. It always does. Duchenne, smile, authenticity. Watch someone smile at you, and your nervous system decides almost instantly whether to trust it. The difference between a real smile and a fake one lives in the eyes, specifically in the small muscles around them that tighten when genuine pleasure fires through your face. When you force a smile, your mouth cooperates, but those eye muscles stay slack. It's called the orbicularis oculi. And it's basically impossible to fake because it runs on a different neural circuit than the muscles you control voluntarily. A real smile, what psychologists call a Duchenne smile after the French neurologist who mapped it, crinkles the corners of your eyes. You've felt the difference 1,000 times without naming it. Someone smiles at you and something in you goes quiet. or someone forces one and you feel the phoniness like a small sting. Here's where attraction gets interesting. People who produce genuine Duchenne smiles more often get rated as more trustworthy, warmer, and yes, more attractive. But here's the trap. The moment you start thinking about producing a Duchenne smile to manipulate someone, your brain often refuses to cooperate. Authenticity is metabolically expensive to fake because your nervous system has to actually shift into a genuine state. You can't trick the orbicularis oculi into believing. The move isn't to study the mechanics or learn the technical smile. It's to notice what genuinely amuses or softens you about the person in front of you, then let your face follow without permission. That micro-authenticity is what people feel moving toward them, and it's what makes them want closer. Asymmetric smile intrigue. There's a moment when someone smiles at you and one side of their mouth rises higher than the other. Not quite a full grin, more like they're letting you in on a small secret. That lopsided pull creates friction in your brain. Your face reading system expects symmetry, and when it doesn't get it, you pause, you lean in, you wonder what they're really thinking. This asymmetry reads as genuine in a way a perfect smile never will, because truly felt smiles are neurologically hard to fake on both sides evenly. Duchenne smiles, the ones that crinkle the eyes and pull the whole face, they're almost never symmetrical. One side usually fires a fraction harder, a fraction faster, so when you see that micro unevenness, your reptile brain registers. This person is actually feeling something, not performing or selling. The asymmetric smile also signals something else, mild amusement, mixed with just enough restraint to suggest you haven't fully won them over yet. That uncertainty is magnetic. It's the difference between someone laughing at your joke and someone smiling like they think you're interesting enough to find out more about. The slight twist creates narrative tension. Your attention locks. You become attuned to whether the asymmetry deepens or flattens, reading it as a signal of their real interest. The next time you're in a conversation and a genuine smile arrives, don't fight the unevenness. Let it live in your face. That crooked half grin is doing heavy work for you. It's saying you're not trying too hard and that you actually mean it. People feel the difference. Mirroring beneath awareness. Watch what happens when you sit across someone and actually pay attention. Not the choreographed version from pop psychology books where you consciously tilt your head like a puppet on strings, but the thing that moves in the dark. You both reach for water at the same moment. Your breathing softens when theirs does. A micro-expression crosses their face and your jaw tenses in echo, a half-second delay. Your shoulders drop when theirs drop. This is neural resonance, the kind of synchronization that happens in the gaps between thought, where the nervous system speaks directly to the nervous system without intention getting in the way. It feels involuntary because it mostly is, and that's exactly what makes it so magnetic. Here's where the hook lives. Mirroring beneath awareness feels indistinguishable from destiny. When someone mirrors you without trying, without even knowing they're doing it, your brain reads that sync as proof they get you. They understand you in a way others don't, but you can accelerate this effect once you see the mechanism. Not by robotically copying their stance, but by genuinely tuning your internal state to theirs. If they're wound tight, you become alert and slightly tense too. If they're playful, you lean into lightness. You're not faking an emotion. You're meeting them in their actual frequency, and they feel it at the nervous system level before they could ever think about it rationally. When someone feels that kind of resonance, they don't think you're trying. They think you're naturally aligned with them. That alignment, whether it emerges organically or you've cultivated it deliberately, creates the illusion of destiny. And that illusion is exactly what keeps them returning. Chameleon effect rapport. You walk into a coffee shop and the barista moves slowly, speaks low, and you feel yourself matching it without choosing to. Your shoulders drop, your voice softens, your breathing sinks. 2 minutes later, they're leaning in, asking follow-up questions, treating you like you matter. Nothing you said was clever. Nothing you did was planned. The shift was invisible, but it worked. That's the chameleon effect. Your nervous system mirroring the other person's body, pace, tone, and energy creates an instant sense of we're the same kind of people. When someone moves like you, they seem safe, familiar, worth liking. Most people think they're choosing to like you based on what you said or how smart you are. They're not. They're choosing because their mirror neurons fired in sync with yours, and synchrony feels like kinship. Here's where it gets darker. A person who mirrors you expertly, who has no fixed self and adapts completely to whoever is in front of them, can feel dangerously compelling. You trust them because they feel like you. You don't notice they have no center, no opinion that isn't borrowed. But the chameleon effect works both ways. This is where you stop being mirrored and start doing the mirroring. Match their pace when they're slow, match their energy when they're serious, match the language they use, the rhythm of their hands, the cadence of their breathing. Not obviously, just enough that your nervous systems start dancing together in the background. The person who feels like they're with someone like themselves will always come back. That's not connection. That's biology working beneath the words. Interactional synchrony pull. Watch someone fall into rhythm with another person and you're watching gravity work in real time. You lean, they lean. You slow your words, they slow theirs. You mirror a gesture. Suddenly, it feels like you're speaking the same language without ever planning it. This is interactional synchrony, and it operates below the noise of consciousness. Your nervous system recognizes itself in theirs and relaxes. That relaxation feels like trust. That recognition feels like desire. The person across from you doesn't know why they feel drawn to you yet. Only that something in their body has quieted down. The dark pull runs deeper. Once you see how to create this synchrony intentionally, you become magnetic. Not through crude manipulation, but through a kind of attunement that makes people feel deeply seen. A person will stay in a conversation with someone who mirrors them because mirrors feel like home. They'll confuse that comfort with compatibility. They'll interpret your matching tempo as genuine interest, even when it's practiced skill. The body keeps no secrets, but the conscious mind is easily fooled by its own reflection staring back. The subtlety matters enormously here. Crude mirroring, copying every gesture like a parrot, triggers alarm, but subtle matching of breathing pace, blink rate, the cadence of speech, the angle of your posture when theirs shifts. This moves below perception. It becomes a dance that feels spontaneous to both people. They think they're naturally drawn to you. What they're actually responding to is their own nervous system finding safety in yours. And once a body feels safe with someone, the mind will write almost any story to justify staying close. Posture, expansion, and dominance. Walk into a room and you'll notice something before anyone speaks. The person who takes up space, not loudly, just physically, their shoulders back, their chest open, their legs uncrossed and planted. Your nervous system reads it as strength before your conscious mind even registers why. This is posture expansion, and it works in both directions. The person who holds that shape feels more confident, and the people watching them feel it too. The science is almost embarrassing in its directness. When you expand your frame, widen your stance, open your arms, lift your chest, your testosterone rises and your cortisol drops. Your body becomes a feedback loop that convinces your brain you're in control. You don't feel dominant because you look dominant. You look dominant because your biology shifted the moment you took that shape. Now, here's where it gets sticky for attraction. People are magnetized to that signal, whether they know it or not. A man who sits compressed, folded inward, apologetic in his posture, reads as smaller, even at 6'3". A woman who elongates her spine and uncrosses her arms sends a quiet broadcast that she's not waiting for permission. The trap most people fall into is thinking this is manipulative or fake. It isn't. Your posture is a direct line to how you feel about yourself. A physical memoir of whether you believe you deserve space. Expand it and you're not performing confidence. You're accessing the version of you that already owns the room. The real move this week isn't to stand differently in front of others. It's to notice where you're making yourself small when no one's watching and ask why. Space-claiming behavior. Walk into a coffee shop and watch someone spread their laptop, phone, notebook, and jacket across a two-seater. They're not trying to be rude. They're marking territory the same way an animal leaves scent on a tree. Humans do this constantly, and most people don't notice they're doing it until someone else sits nearby and the marker gets agitated. That agitation is primal. You just violated someone's claimed space, and their nervous system registered it as a boundary breach. Here's what most people miss. Space claiming isn't about the physical area at all. It's about signaling status and control. The person who sprawls owns the room. The person who folds inward is asking permission to exist there. In attraction, this dynamic flips in fascinating ways. Someone confident enough to claim space, to lean back, to take up room, to not apologize for their presence, reads as higher status, safer, more magnetic. They're not anxious about their right to be there. Conversely, someone constantly minimizing themselves, tucking their limbs, shrinking into corners, signals low confidence and high vigilance. You start unconsciously categorizing them as either threat or subordinate, never as equal or compelling. The dark part, you can claim space deliberately, adjust your physical footprint in a room, control the gravitational pull of your presence. It works because it's not performative. It's read as authenticity. Your body is telling a story about your internal permission structure, and people believe bodies far more than words ever land. The gap between where you shrink and where you sprawl is where your attraction power actually lives, waiting for you to notice it and own it. Slow movement signals calm. Watch someone who is truly comfortable in their own skin, and you'll notice something that most people miss. They move like they own time itself, not arrogantly, not slowly in a way that feels affected, but with this gravitational ease, like every gesture has been decided on before it leaves their body. Most people, by contrast, move like they're running from something invisible. Small jerks, fidgets, hands that jump to pockets or hair or phones the moment silence arrives. Your nervous system reads all of this in real time, whether you know it or not. When someone moves slowly and with intention, your brain interprets that as signal number one. This person is not afraid. They are not scanning for threats. They are not desperate. Fear moves fast. Desperation moves erratic. Calm moves like it has somewhere to be, but no rush to get there. This is not about being glacially slow or theatrical. That reads as weakness or manipulation. It is about removing the jitter. Think of a predator versus prey. The predator doesn't sprint around the savannah panicking. It moves with this economical, almost lazy precision. When you slow your movements down, especially your hands and your head, you send a chemical signal to everyone watching you. This person has already won the moment. They don't need to convince anyone. That signal is magnetic. People want to be near what feels solid. Test this. Next time you're in conversation, slow your hand movements by maybe 30%. Make your gestures deliberate instead of reactive. Notice how the other person's shoulders relax. That is you broadcasting competence without saying a word. Touch escalation gradient. Slide into a booth next to someone instead of across, and their shoulder sits close enough that you feel the warmth without quite touching. Later, when you both stand to leave, a hand finds the small of your back, a guide, not a grab. You don't pull away because it feels so casual, so incidental, that refusing it would require you to make it mean something it doesn't seem to mean yet. This is where the trap lives. Your nervous system doesn't raise an alarm on touches that plausibly could be accidents. A brush of the arm, a hand steadying your elbow on stairs, a moment where their hand stays on your leg just a fraction longer than politeness demands, but not long enough to be unmistakable. By the time touch becomes deliberate and unmissable, you've already consented 100 times in microdoses. The architecture works not because of the big gesture, but because of what came before. An invisible staircase built one small step at a time. Most people escalate too fast and crash into your boundary like a wall. Someone who knows this gradient moves through the stages so fluidly that you're not calculating whether you want this. Your nervous system has already coded familiarity as safety, and safety unlocks momentum. The dangerous part isn't the touch itself, but how easy it becomes to feel like you chose something that was actually choreographed, decided for you in increments too small to refuse. The real skill is knowing when someone starts building that ladder, noticing which touches feel accidental and which ones in retrospect clearly never were. Plausible deniability touch. You know that moment when someone brushes your arm while reaching past you, and you can't quite tell if it was intentional or just the logistics of moving through space. That is the entire skill. Plausible deniability touch is the art of making contact that creates a ripple of attraction while giving both people a perfect escape hatch. You can deny it meant anything, and so can they. It lives in that gray zone where attraction can breathe without shame, a hand on the small of the back guiding someone through a doorway, your knee touching theirs under a table for just half a second longer than accident would explain, fingers brushing as you both reach for the same glass. The magic is that it's impossible to prove intent. Your nervous system knows what happened. Their nervous system knows what happened. But your rational minds can both pretend it was accident, proximity, nothing. This matters because people are terrified of rejection, and plausible deniability removes that terror entirely. There is no embarrassing confrontation if they pull away. It was just normal contact anyway. But if they lean in, if they don't move, if they mirror it back, then you have confirmation without words. The touch also bypasses social surveillance. Nobody is watching you in a casual brush. Your defenses are down. Your skin is listening when your mind isn't policing the moment. The trap is mistaking this for permission to cross actual boundaries. Plausible deniability only works when you respect the real line. You're testing interest, not manufacturing compliance. Done right, it's how two people admit attraction without the risk that makes desire feel dangerous. Kino calibration feedback. You touch her arm to make a point and she leans in. You do it again 5 minutes later and she visibly stiffens. Nothing in your intention changed, only her response did. That shift is Kino calibration and most people miss it entirely. Kino is simply touch, casual, purposeful, testing the temperature, but calibration is what separates someone who reads the room from someone who keeps trying the same move until it breaks the mood. Here's how it works. Every small touch, a hand on the back, a shoulder tap guiding her past a doorway, is data. She either opens toward it or closes away. Opens, you keep going. Closes, you pause and rebuild comfort first. This isn't manipulation, it's respect dressed up as instinct. The trap most people fall into is thinking calibration means asking permission every time. It doesn't. It means reading her body language so cleanly that asking becomes unnecessary, or when you do ask, she's already leaning toward yes. That's the real power. When you notice her pulling back, stepping sideways, or going quiet after you touch, you don't double down. You pull back, laugh, keep the conversation light, and rebuild from a distance. Maybe 5 minutes later, you try again on lower stakes, a brief brush, nothing loaded. She settles? Good. Now you have permission in real time. The dark part nobody mentions is that some people will test you with pullback just to see if you'll respect it. If you do, attraction actually deepens because you've proved you're not desperate. If you don't, you've just proved you're running a script, not reading a person. That difference is everything. Scent and immune signaling. There's a molecule in your sweat right now that's having a conversation your conscious mind doesn't know about. Your immune system talks in a chemical language, and when someone smells you, really smells you, they're reading a resume of how healthy, resilient, and genetically different you are from them. This isn't poetic. It's biology waging a silent campaign for attraction that started long before your brain learned to rationalize desire. Your major histocompatibility complex, or MHC, is essentially your immune fingerprint. It broadcasts what threats your body has survived and what infections you can fight. Women, in study after study, find men whose MHC is most different from their own more attractive because offspring with different immune profiles can fight a wider range of diseases. You're literally smelling genetic diversity, and your body votes for it before your brain has a say. The preference isn't learned. It's old. A woman on birth control, where hormone levels are artificially stable, actually loses this ability to smell immune compatibility correctly. Switch her back to natural cycles and the preference returns. She was chemically muted and attraction shifted without her knowledge. You can't see this happening, but every interaction starts with an invisible scan that's been running for millennia, filtering, assessing, deciding. The dark part, someone's scent-based attraction to you can't really be negotiated or reasoned away. You can't argue someone into finding your immune profile hot. What you can do is recognize that initial magnetism, the ones who lean in closer, whose pupils dilate. They're responding to something primal you can't fake. That recognition matters because it means some of the deepest connections have roots you'll never fully see or control. Pheromonal familiarity bias. Your nose knows things your brain hasn't caught up to yet. Walk into a room where someone you're drawn to has been sitting, and without realizing it, you're already responding to the chemical fingerprint they left behind, not consciously smelling them, but absorbing the microscopic signature of their body chemistry. Your limbic system recognizes patterns in their scent that echo your own biology or suggest genetic compatibility, and suddenly they feel safer, more recognizable, almost like home, even if you only met them yesterday. Repetition amplifies the effect dramatically. Spend time in the same space as someone, wear their jacket, Sit close enough to breathe the same air, and your nervous system starts cataloging them as familiar. Familiar feels good. Familiar feels like it belongs. People often mistake this for chemistry or connection, but it's partly just the brain recognizing a pattern it has learned to expect. The darker edge cuts sharper than most realize. Proximity alone can engineer this sensation. Show up consistently, stay close enough long enough. Their body chemistry becomes a comfortable pattern your system craves returning to. They might interpret that comfort as genuine attraction to you specifically, when really their nervous system is just recognizing what is familiar and safe, what appears reliable because you engineered the repetition. Scent is one of the few senses that bypasses rational thinking almost entirely, moving straight into the limbic system where decisions about safety and belonging get made before your conscious mind even has a voice. Use proximity and presence as deliberate tools, and you're working with something deeper than personality or charm, something their body recognizes and responds to before they've formed a single thought about who you are. Emotional labeling intimacy. Someone says, "I feel overwhelmed," and you nod. But what if they'd said, "I feel like I'm drowning in noise and can't remember who I am"? The second one hits different. That specificity, that naming of the exact texture of a feeling, creates intimacy that generic emotion words never touch. When you learn to label your own feelings with precision, you're not just becoming more self-aware. You're building a bridge other people can actually walk across to reach you. Most people stumble through life saying, "I'm fine," or "I'm stressed," without ever touching the real geography of what's happening inside, using emotional shorthand the way you'd say "the city" instead of describing the corner, the light, the sound. That vagueness keeps people at arm's length. But here's where the darkness lives. When you learn to name your emotions with surgical specificity, you gain the ability to make other people feel seen without revealing the full truth. You can say, "I felt abandoned" when you didn't text back, and trigger recognition so powerful they fill in their own story of abandonment. They think they understand you deeply, but you've given them just enough real detail to make them project their own wounds onto the space you've created. The intimacy becomes real for them, even if your precision was half theater. People crave understanding so badly, they'll mistake articulation for authenticity every single time. Learn to name what you genuinely feel, but know that once you master it, you've also learned how to make people feel close to a version of you that may not exist. Vulnerability, window timing. Right after someone tells you something that costs them a fear, a mistake, a grief they've been carrying alone, their whole nervous system changes. The guard drops, the room gets quieter, and for the next 60 to 90 seconds, something neurological is actually happening in them. They've just been seen and they're tender, and most people miss this window entirely because they either rush to fix it with advice or pull back thinking they've made the other person uncomfortable. What actually magnetizes people is showing up during that window, not to lecture, not to solve, but to sit in the feeling with them, to say something true back. Not a matching confession necessarily, but a moment of genuine presence that says without words, "I see you, and I'm still here." The vulnerability window closes the moment the person starts self-protecting again. When they get a joke in, change the subject, or start rationalizing what they just revealed. You can't reopen it by forcing intimacy or pretending the shift didn't happen. The real power is this. People don't fall into deep attraction because you're perfect or impressive. They fall because you showed up when it mattered most. You met them in their softest moment and didn't run. You didn't weaponize it later. You didn't make it about you or your own need to be the hero. That timing, that precise knowing of how to hold space, is what actually rewires someone's nervous system at the deepest level. They start to believe safety is possible with you, not because you promised it in words, but because you proved it in the exact moment when they were most afraid. Disclosure reciprocity ladder. There's a moment in every deepening connection when someone tells you something small about themselves, maybe a childhood nickname, a weird habit, a small failure, and suddenly you feel permission to share something back. That permission isn't random. It's built into how human bonding actually works, and people who know how to climb that ladder intentionally become magnetic. You don't dump your whole life story on a stranger and expect intimacy. You trade secrets like currency, each revelation earning you the right to ask for something deeper in return. Someone mentions they're anxious about work, you mention you used to spiral, they tell you about their therapy, you admit your own dark phases. The ladder climbs. What makes this particularly sticky in attraction is that people feel safest with those who disclose first and proportionally. If you share something moderately vulnerable before asking them to go deeper, they don't feel interrogated. They feel like you've already paid in. You're not extracting information. You're inviting them into an exchange. The trap most people fall into is either staying entirely surface, which keeps attraction shallow and transactional, or jumping straight to intensity, which feels like emotional whiplash and makes people recoil. The art is pacing. Go first with something real but not devastating, then wait, then match their depth, then inch upward together. People fall hardest for those who feel knowable but not immediately known, who unfold themselves on a schedule that lets others feel safe unfolding back. That reciprocal vulnerability is where real attraction lives, and it's dangerous because it transforms connection from performance into genuine conspiracy, a shared secret that binds you both. Fast friends escalation protocol. 3 hours at a party and suddenly you're finishing each other's sentences, sharing inside jokes, feeling like you've known someone for years, the kind of intimacy that normally takes months to build. This isn't luck or accident. It's a specific psychological machinery, and the moment you see how it works, you'll spot it everywhere. The fast friends protocol hinges on compression. Emotional beats that normally spread across time get stacked into a tight window instead. Vulnerability escalates. One person shares something real, the other matches it with something equally deep, raising the stakes. You're not swapping surface facts. You're trading genuine admission. Your brain registers this as trust building because neurologically it is. But here's where the mechanism shifts. Shared adversity or intensity accelerates this bonding by orders of magnitude. Two people stuck in an awkward situation, laughing at the same disaster or solving a minor challenge together, that does more relational work than a dozen casual coffees. The machinery is partly chemical. Stress hormones and synchronized problem-solving trigger oxytocin and dopamine floods. You're synchronizing nervous systems at a deep level. The dark part is what follows. This creates a profound illusion of knowing someone. You feel close. You are biochemically closer, but you haven't yet weathered disagreement, boredom, or real friction. The person who mesmerized you in that compressed window might be unrecognizable in ordinary time. The intoxication is neurologically real, but the depth is mostly potential. That fast friend click you feel during intensity isn't false. Your body has genuinely bonded. The trap is mistaking compression for actual history, thinking 30 hours of concentrated fire equals a real relationship. Storytelling and identification. You know the moment when someone tells you about a failure and suddenly you're not judging them anymore. You're rooting for them. That shift happens because they didn't hand you facts. They handed you themselves inside a story. The trick is this. When you narrate your own struggle, your own mistake, your own climb, you stop being a stranger with credentials and become someone the listener recognizes as human. That recognition is where attraction lives. Most people try to impress by polishing the surface, the win, the status, the thing they got right. But the people who stick in your memory are the ones who let you see the moment before the win, the doubt, the false start, the version of them that didn't know what you know now. When you do that, something shifts in the listener's brain. They're no longer passively receiving information. They're inside your experience, predicting what happens next, hoping you'll make it through. That's identification. That's the neural equivalent of someone choosing to be close to you. The darker edge cuts sharper still. Vulnerability, told well, is not weakness. It's a spotlight pointed at your self-awareness. You're not asking for pity. You're showing you can see yourself clearly. People are drawn to that clarity because it signals strength, not fragility. The story of how you broke and rebuilt is infinitely more attractive than the story of someone who never broke at all. And every person who hears it will feel the pull without being able to name it. Tell the real one. The listener will lean in without knowing why. Strategic self-deprecation. There's a person in every room who jokes about their own flaws before anyone else can. They'll laugh and say something like, "Yeah, I'm terrible at this," or "I know I'm a mess," and somehow it makes them more magnetic, not less. Most people assume this works because humility is attractive, but that's only half the story. What's really happening is far more calculated than it appears on the surface. When you self-deprecate strategically, you're doing something counterintuitive. You're stealing the ammunition other people might use against you, and you're turning it into proof that you're secure enough to admit it. Insecure people never point out their own weaknesses first. They defend, deflect, hide. So the person who can laugh at themselves seems untouchable, like they're so comfortable in their own skin that criticism can't land. You've already disarmed the weapon before anyone swings it. But here's the trap that catches most people. It only works if the self-deprecation is selective and strategic. If you're constantly putting yourself down, you become pitiable instead of appealing. The magic lives in the contrast. You mention one real flaw with humor or lightness, then you move on to something you're genuinely confident about. The vulnerability makes the confidence stick harder. It reads as honest rather than fake perfection. The dark version of this is knowing exactly which insecurity will land with a specific person, using it to lower their defenses, and then positioning yourself as the one person who gets them anyway. That's when self-deprecation becomes a tool for deeper pull. Choose what you reveal and to whom very carefully. Pratfall effect, likability. There's a moment in every perfectly composed person's day when something cracks. A CEO fumbles their words in a meeting, a model trips on the runway, a confident stranger orders a coffee and spills it everywhere. And suddenly, without meaning to, they become human. That slip is a pratfall, and it rewires how people feel about you. Here's what's strange. When someone already thinks you're competent, that small failure makes them like you more, not less. It works because perfection is lonely. We trust things that glitch. A flawless person triggers envy or distance. A flawless person who drops something triggers recognition. You become relatable. The mechanism runs deeper than comfort. When you show a small vulnerability, people unconsciously think, okay, they're not superhuman. They're someone I could actually know. That permission to be real creates attraction and connection where distance lived before. But here's the trap. This only works if you're already positioned as competent. If people already doubt you, a pratfall confirms their suspicion. If you're established and credible, that small mistake is charming. If you're uncertain, it's just confirmation they were right. The play is strategic. Show up strong, prove your competence, then let them catch you being human, not sloppy or desperate, but authentically flawed. The people who master this don't hide their stumbles. They let the right people see them at exactly the moment it counts. It's the difference between looking like you're falling apart and looking like someone brave enough to be real, secure enough to not perform every second. That's when attraction shifts from admiration into something warmer, something that feels chosen rather than distant. Flaw, disclosure, preemption. Most people wait for someone to find their flaws, then scramble to defend them. You do the opposite. You name them first, not as confession, as clarity. Someone asks what you struggle with, and instead of deflecting or fishing for reassurance, you just say it. I get distant when I'm stressed. I know it happens. I'm working on it. The listener's brain goes quiet. They were braced for dishonesty or self-pity. They got neither. What they got was someone who sees themselves clearly, and that shifts the entire dynamic. When you preempt a flaw, you strip the shame from the air. There's nothing scandalous left to uncover, nothing to catch you in. But the deeper move is this. Preemption frames you as genuinely self-aware. Self-aware people are attractive in a way perfection never is. Perfection feels like a performance, while awareness feels like power. The person listening realizes you're not trying to hide. You're being strategic about what matters. You pick something real but not central to your character and own it before they can weaponize it. A tendency to overthink, a fear of closeness that arrives too fast, an old wound that still makes you guarded. Name it with the same ease you discuss the weather. This isn't vulnerability performed for effect. It's the opposite. It's the confidence of someone who doesn't need anyone's approval of their flaws because they already know what they're working with, neither ashamed nor performing acceptance. That quiet certainty is magnetic. It's what makes people trust you, keep coming back, and stop looking for the trap. Ben Franklin effect leverage. You know that moment in a negotiation when the other person suddenly softens, not because you did something generous for them, but because you asked them for something. Benjamin Franklin stumbled onto this backwards truth centuries ago. He wanted to befriend a political rival, so instead of flattering him or offering help, he asked to borrow a rare book. The rival said yes. Days later, they were friends. Not because Franklin had given, but because the rival had. Here's what happens beneath the surface. When someone does something for you, their brain automatically updates their self-image to match the behavior. Their mind whispers, I must actually like this person because I just helped them. The favor becomes proof of their own internal story about who you are. It's the opposite of what we're taught, but it rewrites everything. The leverage is this. People who already lean toward you are vulnerable. Ask them for something real: advice, a connection, feedback, a small introduction. Not so large it feels like a trap, but substantial enough that it costs them something: time, thought, a small social risk. They will rationalize the help as evidence they care about you. Each favor becomes a vote they cast for themselves about your importance. The sharper move is the inverse. If you want someone to remain neutral, never ask for anything. Never let them invest. Never give their brain the chance to rewrite the story. What people give, they become complicit in. So ask the right person at the right moment for exactly the right thing, and you've handed them the tools to convince themselves they want you around. Effort, justification, bonding. There's a reason expensive restaurants make you feel more connected to the person across the table, and it has nothing to do with the food. You paid a lot, spent time getting dressed, made reservations weeks ago, and now you're sitting in a room where every detail signals commitment. Your brain does something sneaky. It reasons backward from the effort. If I went through all this, the thinking goes, this person must matter. The harder you work to be with someone, the more your mind automatically inflates their value to justify that work. People who chase you hardest are often the ones you want most because they've already paid the price: emotional labor, vulnerability, persistence, and that price becomes proof of your worth. You feel it as genuine attraction, but it's partly cognitive rescue. Your brain cannot allow itself to believe you suffered for someone unworthy, so it rewrites the story. Suddenly, they're fascinating. Their flaws become quirks. Their distance becomes depth. The dark edge is how easily this gets weaponized. Someone who strings you along, makes you work for crumbs, forces you to prove yourself over and over. They're building a monument in your mind through sheer friction. The effort becomes the bonding agent, and the more you give, the more your brain insists they're worth giving to. The pattern feels like love because your mind has too much invested to call it anything else. When you notice yourself drawn to someone because of how hard they are to reach, not who they actually are, you're watching attachment get manufactured, not earned. Sunk cost in relationships. 3 years in, and you realize it wasn't right anymore around year 2. But you stayed because admitting that would mean the first 2 years were built on something false: money, time, emotional labor, vulnerability, inside jokes, shared plans. Once you've poured all of it in, your brain treats staying like a rational investment even when it's become a tomb. Your heart doesn't do refunds, it does justifications. Here's where it gets colder. People who have already invested heavily in you are statistically more likely to stay, even after attraction has cooled or respect has fractured, because leaving requires them to face the losses they've already suffered. They don't leave, they ghost through the relationship instead, present but distant, loyal but resentful, moving like ghosts in a house they no longer want to live in. And if you see this mechanism clearly, you can work with it deliberately, not through cruelty, but through cold awareness of how memory and identity fuse. Early on, create moments so vivid and meaningful that the sunk cost becomes your ally instead of your enemy. A shared goal that becomes their identity. An inside joke they'll reference for years. Weave yourself into their narrative so thoroughly that leaving feels like erasing part of their own story. The trap cuts both ways, though. Recognize when you're staying because of the weight already paid, not because of anything coming next. That heaviness you feel isn't love. It's arithmetic pretending to be devotion. What actually builds attraction and keeps people close is momentum forward, not the gravitational pull of past losses. Loss aversion in courtship. When you're texting someone you like and they take 4 hours to reply, your stomach drops before your brain even knows why. You don't feel excited about the possibility of their next message. You feel terrified of losing their interest. That asymmetry is everything. Loss aversion means we feel the sting of losing something roughly twice as hard as the pleasure of gaining it. And in courtship, this becomes your invisible script. You will chase harder to keep someone's attention than you ever would to court someone new. A person who pulls away suddenly feels more valuable, not less, because now they're a threat, not an opportunity. This is why people stay in half relationships for months. It's not love, it's loss aversion pretending to be love. The real trap is that you start performing out of fear instead of desire. You become reactive, checking your phone, adjusting your tone, shrinking your boundaries so they won't leave. And they feel that desperation beneath your smile. What people actually want in courtship is someone who has something to lose but isn't afraid of the loss. Someone whole enough to say no, to step back, to keep their own life running. That paradox breaks loss aversion's spell. The person chasing hardest usually wins the least. So the move isn't to ignore someone or play games. It's to genuinely invest in your own life so thoroughly that their reply becomes nice instead of necessary. When you stop needing their next message to mean you still matter, they feel the difference immediately. That's when the real attraction happens. Endowment effect of presence. There's a moment in every room where someone stops being a possibility and becomes a fact. They show up, they stay, and suddenly the air tastes different. That shift from abstract to actual, from imagined to real, is where the endowment effect of presence lives. And it's one of the fastest ways to become magnetic without saying much at all. The endowment effect usually means we value something more just because we own it. But with presence, it means people value you more the moment you occupy their space consistently, without urgency, without needing anything from them. You become a fixture, a constant, and humans are wired to protect what's familiar. When you're the one who's simply there, steady, genuinely interested in what's happening around you, not performing for attention, you shift from option to anchor. People start assuming you have value because your presence has become part of their landscape. The trap is thinking you need to be impressive or rare to matter. Wrong. The opposite is closer to truth. Show up, be real, do it again. Don't vanish when things get quiet or complicated. That repetition, that willingness to just exist in the room without theatrics rewires how people think about you at a primal level. They stop asking, why should I want this person? And start asking, what happens when they're not here? The endowment effect means people protect what they've grown used to having, and by that point, they're already protecting you without even knowing it's happening. Presence isn't flashy, it's patient, and patience, in the end, always wins. Boundary testing probes. Someone cancels plans with you last minute, and before you even respond, you find yourself offering to reschedule immediately. Free yourself of the guilt they might feel, cushion the blow, make it easy for them. That instinct? That's a probe hitting you, and you just failed the test without knowing one was running. Boundary testing is how people figure out what they can get away with, how much of your resources they can extract, and whether your words mean anything or just bend under pressure. It starts small, a tiny ask that violates something you said mattered, a minor line cross, a request that makes you uncomfortable but not quite uncomfortable enough to push back hard. Most people don't think of it as hostile. It's not always conscious. but the pattern is ruthless. Test, watch for flinching, calibrate, push harder next time. The person who keeps borrowing money just this once after you've said you can't loan anymore is probing. The one who texts you late at night after you've set an evening boundary, watching to see if you'll respond, is probing. What makes it stick is that you usually don't retaliate, you just absorb it, apologize, renegotiate downward on what you actually wanted. The dark version of this is that people with high social intelligence know exactly what they're doing. They're gathering data on your actual limits, not your stated ones. Your job is simple. Make your boundary mean the same thing the second time it's tested as it did the first. Don't soften it. Don't explain it again. Just hold it. That consistency is what stops the probing cold. Compliance momentum tactics. You ask someone for a small favor, help you move a box. They say yes without thinking. 3 days later, you ask them to help you with your entire apartment. They're already in motion, already seeing themselves as helpful. The second yes follows the first one like water down a slope. That is compliance momentum, and it works because our brains are lazy about consistency. Once we say yes to something, we want to keep saying yes, not because we logically chose to, but because our identity is now tied to being a certain kind of person. The power lives in the gradient. You don't ask for the big thing first. A small commitment creates a tiny identity shift. I'm the kind of person who helps. Then the next ask doesn't feel like a contradiction. It feels like staying true to who I already am. This is why sales teams ask for your email before your money, why therapists ask you to write down your goals, why you text a crush something tiny before something real. Each yes makes the next yes easier because you're not being persuaded. You're being consistent with your own story. The trap is that you're already running this on yourself, often backward. That nasty comment you made becomes part of your self-image. That compromise you accepted becomes your new boundary. Small surrenders accumulate like debt. The next one costs less, psychologically, because you've already paid interest on the first. Notice where you're already committed. What momentum are you riding? Because once the wheel turns, it's harder to stop than it was to start. Foot in the door escalation. You ask someone for 5 minutes of their time. They say yes. A week later, you ask for an hour and they agree without much friction. By month 3, you are asking for things that would have been rejected flat on day 1, and they feel obligated to say yes because of the tiny yes that came before. This works because consistency feels like integrity to the human brain. Once we have done something, we become the person who does that thing. Once we commit, even small, we defend that commitment like it is part of our identity. The trap is this: the asker never has to mislead you. Each individual request can feel reasonable on its own, but they are stacked. The requests grow, the stakes rise, and you are still the person who said yes last time, so saying no now feels like betrayal of yourself. Attraction works the same way. You get someone to invest a small amount of time, attention, or vulnerability. They do. Now they are the kind of person who spends time with you, who listens to you. That identity is sticky. The next ask is easier. The one after that, easier still. It is not manipulation if you understand what is happening. It is just how commitment actually works in the real world. The catch is knowing whether you are doing this to someone or someone is doing it to you. Either way, you are watching identity form in real time, one small yes building on the last, and by the time they see the pattern, they have already become someone new. Door in the face pivot. You ask someone for something small, coffee, their time, a favor. They say yes. Then you ask for the thing you actually wanted all along. The first request was a setup. This is door in the face pivot, and it works because it rewires how they see themselves and what they owe. The psychology is deceptively simple. Rejection makes people feel bad about the refusal itself, not just the thing you asked for. So when you pivot to something smaller, they take it as a chance to correct that feeling. They say yes to prove they are not the kind of person who turns you down flat. You have turned their guilt into a permission slip. What makes it dark is that it requires reading exactly how much tension to create and when to release it. The first ask has to be just big enough that no is the obvious answer, but not so absurd that they laugh and dismiss you entirely. Then the second ask has to feel like a real concession on your part, like you heard their hesitation and made it manageable. If you swing it right, they feel like they won something, got you to back down, became generous. They do not feel like they were managed. The thing to notice is that this works on people who care about how they come across. Someone proud, someone who values being helpful, someone who hates looking stingy. These are your easiest pivots. They are not weak. They just care. And that care is the door you are walking through. Lowball commitment creep. You agree to coffee, 1 cup, no pressure, casual Friday afternoon. Weeks later, you're canceling plans with friends because they've texted you 3 times that day and you don't want to seem distant. Notice what happened. There was no moment where you signed up for this. The commitment never announced itself. It just got heavier, one small yes stacked on top of another, until suddenly you're orbiting someone's life and you can't pinpoint when that started. Your brain treats incremental changes like they're invisible. You don't register the shift from occasional hangout to expected daily contact the way you would if someone asked outright, "Be mine exclusively starting Monday." The genius of it, intentional or not, is that each individual ask feels reasonable. Another coffee, a late night call, meeting their friend. Each one is tiny, almost trivial to refuse. But refusal creates friction, and friction feels like cruelty when you've already said yes dozens of times. So you keep saying yes, ratcheting up your availability and emotional investment in such small increments that you never feel like you made a choice. By the time you realize the depth of what you've agreed to, you're already tangled. Start watching for when you're making exceptions that become the rule. Notice that moment when sometimes starts feeling like an obligation. Pay attention to the tiny resentments that creep in before the big ones surface. If you catch it early, when it's still just coffee, you can reset without guilt or elaborate apology. But if you wait until you're deep in, untangling gets messy and expensive, and both of you will feel the cost. Labeling technique, identity hook. Watch what happens the moment you pin someone with a single word. Call someone the funny one at a party, and they'll start performing before the night ends. Tell a partner, "You're so patient," and they'll contort themselves to match it. The labeling technique works because it bypasses logic entirely. When you attach a label to someone's identity, they don't just hear flattery, they absorb it as evidence of who they are, and then they unconsciously reshape their behavior to prove it true. The person you labeled becomes invested in living up to that story because rejecting it would mean dismantling how they see themselves. You've handed them a mirror, but it's a mirror designed to show them exactly what you want them to see. Identity is fragile and hungry, and people will perform to match the narratives you give them. Tell someone they're really driven or someone with actual depth, and you're not complimenting them. You're programming their self-image. they'll start making choices that align with that description. They'll return to you again and again because you saw something in them they didn't know existed. The attachment builds quietly because they're not actually attached to you. They're attached to the version of themselves you created when you applied that label. And here's the dark part. Once that identity sticks, they'll defend it fiercely. Challenge the label, and you're challenging their entire sense of self. That person is now yours through the simple act of giving them a story about who they are that feels better than the one they had before. Jealousy induction risks. You've seen it work. The person you're chasing locks their phone when you walk in, mentions an ex with a little too much warmth, claims they're busy Friday, but posts a photo at a bar with someone new, and suddenly you're texting more, asking questions, rearranging your schedule to prove you matter. Jealousy strikes like a match under someone's ribs, but here's what almost nobody warns you about. It's also the fastest way to torch whatever you actually built. The mechanism is brutally real. A small threat to exclusivity triggers the loss aversion circuit in the brain. We protect what we think we're losing far harder than we pursue what we merely want. Your brain can smell the difference between authentic social proof and manufactured scarcity. One is you genuinely having a full life and letting them notice it. The other is ghost texting someone in front of them, fabricating a rival, or engineering exclusion. After the initial spike of panic-driven interest comes the hard part, a slow, metastatic resentment that builds like sediment. They start wondering why they're with someone who makes them feel disposable and anxious. Trust doesn't recover from deliberate manipulation. It calcifies into suspicion and hypervigilance. Even if you win and lock them down through jealousy, you've now locked yourself into a relationship where you have to keep performing the threat forever. You become the person they're actively trying to escape, not the person they choose to stay for. The cruelest irony, the attraction you borrowed through jealousy is the opposite of the kind that makes someone actually want to build something real with you. Triangulation of desire. Think about when you wanted someone more because they were wanted by someone else, not imagined, actually pursued, texted, or sitting across from them at dinner. That heat, that sudden urgency in your chest, that is triangulation, and it works because scarcity rewires attraction faster than almost anything else. The third point, the rival, the ex they're still close to, the person they're texting while you're there, transforms you from a person choosing freely into someone fighting for limited supply. Your brain shifts. Suddenly, they are not just appealing. They are proof that you have good taste because someone else saw it first. When you're alone with someone, attraction can be rational, slow, even polite. But the moment a third party enters, whether as threat, ghost, or active competitor, desire becomes tribal. It becomes about winning, about proving something. And here's where it gets dangerous. You can manufacture this. A person skilled at triangulation keeps you slightly uncertain about how wanted you are. They mention an ex in the right light. They take longer to text back because they're busy with someone. They let you catch them being noticed. Each triangle tightens the knot, but knowing the mechanism is your way out of the spell. When you feel that sudden spike of, I need to lock this down, pause and ask, am I attracted to them or am I attracted to being chosen? Because those feel identical in the moment, but they lead to very different places. The person who uses triangulation on you is counting on you not asking that question. Ask it anyway. Mimetic desire spread. Watch a crowded room when someone walks in and one person's face lights up. Within 30 seconds, 3 more people are watching. Within 2 minutes, half the room has angled their bodies toward that corner. Nobody made an announcement. Nobody said this person is worth your attention. But desire, real, felt, embodied desire, moved through the group like a wave, and most people never noticed it had a source outside themselves. That's mimetic desire spread. We want what we see others wanting, not because the object itself changed, but because we inherited the wanting from someone else's nervous system. Here's where it gets dark. When you trace back your own attractions, you stop believing they're purely yours. That person you think you're attracted to might be, but maybe you noticed someone else noticing them first. Maybe a friend's jealousy planted the seed. Maybe an ex's lingering attention created artificial scarcity. You absorbed the wanting before your own body had time to form an opinion. The person who can orchestrate this, who can make themselves the target of borrowed desire, doesn't need to be the most beautiful in the room. They just need to be wanted by someone people respect. The wanting spreads faster than the truth, and the strange part is that the copied desire often becomes as real as the original. Your body doesn't distinguish between the two. By the time you're 3 levels deep in mimetic desire, it feels like the realest thing you've ever felt. That's the trap. Borrowed hunger becomes felt truth before you even notice the transfer happened. Negging and why it fails. You've probably felt it in a conversation. Someone slides in a small criticism disguised as a compliment. You'd be so pretty if you just did your hair differently. That's cute that you think that, but actually, the move has a name: negging. And it's based on a real idea about attraction, that a tiny knock to someone's confidence can make them work harder to prove themselves to you. The theory goes that if you lower someone's perceived social value, they'll scramble to raise it back up, and in that scramble, they'll invest more in you. It sounds almost clever. It almost works once or twice on certain people in certain moods. But here's what kills it. People are not as dumb as the negging playbook assumes. After the first hit, the listener doesn't think, I need to impress this person. They think, this person is insulting me. The attention you've captured now has a flavor. It's defensive, wary, calculating. You've turned yourself into a source of mild pain, and the human nervous system is exquisitely tuned to detect and avoid pain. So they don't scramble, they leave, or they stay, but become someone's version of a joyless project, performing instead of connecting. The people most susceptible to negging are those already beaten down, the exact people you probably don't want to build something real with. Real attraction doesn't come from someone doubting themselves around you. It comes from someone feeling safer, smarter, more themselves in your presence. That's the sustainable edge. That's the game that actually scales. Dark triad initial advantage. You meet someone at a party. They make you laugh before you know their name. They touch your arm just long enough to register but not overstay. They ask about you, remember it, then disappear for exactly the right amount of time. A week later, they text something clever and slightly mysterious. By month 3, you're convinced they're the most interesting person you've ever known, even though, looking back, they've told you almost nothing real about themselves. What you're watching is narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism in their opening act, dressed up as charisma. The narcissist's confidence reads as certainty. The psychopath's shallow charm feels genuine because they're so skilled at mirroring what you need to hear. The Machiavellian strategic distance makes them seem rare, valuable, hard to impress, someone worth chasing. They're executing a perfect opening move, and the cruelest truth is that you're not paranoid to notice it works. Research confirms people with dark triad traits attract others faster and more intensely early on, especially if you're already lonely or searching for someone who seems to have it figured out. The real trap isn't stupidity or blindness. The trap is that the early attention is real. The chemistry is real, even if the person underneath is already calculating 3 moves ahead. They're not faking the charm. They're just selective about where it lands, strategic about when it gets turned off. What matters now is staying awake past the initial rush long enough to notice when generosity becomes selective, when attention becomes conditional, when the person you fell for stops looking like a person and starts looking like a role they were always performing. Machiavellian charm decay. There's a moment when you stop calculating and the other person feels it. You've been smooth so far. The right joke at the right time. The perfect amount of distance and closeness. The strategic vulnerability that makes them believe they're seeing the real you. It works. They're leaning in. But here's where the trap tightens. You think the game ends when attraction starts, and it doesn't. The game just gets harder because now you have to keep performing without a crack, and no human can sustain that forever without getting tired, irritated, or sloppy. The mask has a shelf life. What felt like confidence to them starts to feel like something else when they catch you being inconsistent, warm one day, distant the next, generous when you want something, stingy when they need you. The careful listener becomes someone who's actually just waiting for their turn to talk. They don't call you out directly. Instead, they get quieter, they stop texting first, they start comparing you to how you were in month 2, and you begin to feel like you're failing a test you didn't know you were still taking. Machiavellian charm works precisely because it's precise, but precision requires constant maintenance. The moment you stop maintaining is the moment they start wondering if any of it was real. That wondering is where attraction doesn't fade. It inverts. They don't hate you. They resent you for making them feel stupid for believing you. The highest leverage play isn't perfect performance. It's being genuinely interested enough that you don't have to perform at all,